The smoke alarm was screaming when I pulled into my parents' driveway at 11 p.m. I'd come to pick up my portfolio, 43 paintings I'd stored in their garage while my studio was being fumigated. My first solo gallery opening was tomorrow. Every piece was already in the catalog. Every piece had been advertised. 3 were already sold to collectors who'd seen previews. I found them in the backyard, standing around the fire pit, wine glasses in hand. My mother was feeding something into the flames, something canvas-shaped, something that looked like. "What are you doing?" My voice came out as a whisper, then a scream. "What are you doing?" Mom turned, her face illuminated by the orange glow, and smiled. Actually smiled. "Oh, Sophia, we're helping you finally grow up." That's when I saw clearly what was burning. My paintings, years of work, thousands of hours, my entire portfolio turning to ash in their decorative fire pit. "Real jobs don't need this garbage," Mom laughed, tossing another small canvas into the flames, my portrait series, the one that had taken 6 months to complete. "We're doing you a favor." Dad lifted his beer in a mock toast. "Time to grow up, failure. You're 28. This starving artist phase was cute at 22. Now it's just embarrassing." I dropped to my knees, reaching toward the fire, trying to save something, anything. The heat drove me back, but not before I saw the remnants of Tempest, the piece that had won the Emerging Artist Award. The one already sold for $12,000. "You burned them?" I said, my voice hollow. "You burned everything." "Not everything," my younger brother Connor said from the shadows, holding up one small painting, a landscape I'd done in high school. "We kept this one to show you had potential once, before you wasted it on this nonsense. The gallery opening is tomorrow. People are coming from New York, from Los Angeles. There are collectors." "We called and canceled," Mom said brightly. "Told them you'd had a mental breakdown, that you destroyed your own work in a manic episode. They were very understanding." The world tilted. "You, what?" "Dr. Morrison, you remember, our friend from the club. He wrote a letter supporting our story. Said he'd been treating you for bipolar disorder." Dad pulled out his phone, showing me an email. "See? All official. The gallery already responded. They're concerned for your well-being and have canceled the showing." I stared at the formal cancellation from Gallery Montrose sent 2 hours ago. They were deeply concerned about my mental health crisis and wished me a speedy recovery. "You're insane," I whispered. "No, sweetheart," Mom patted my head like I was 5. "According to the paper trail, you are." "Why?" I stood shaking. "Why would you do this?" "Because Harrison Brennan's daughter doesn't work retail while pretending to be an artist," Dad said. "I'm CFO of a Fortune 500 company. Your mother is on 3 charity boards. Connor's at Harvard Law. And you? You're embarrassing us. I'm not working retail. I teach art at the community center to pay rent while I build my career." "Exactly. Teaching finger painting to housewives. Living in that raffle apartment. Driving that ancient Honda." Mom shuddered. "The Weatherby's asked about you at the gala last month. I had to lie and say you were studying abroad." "I didn't ask you to lie." "Your existence is a lie," Connor chimed in, ever the golden child. "You're nearly 30 with nothing to show for it but some paintings no one wants. 3 were already sold." "To whom?" "Other broke artists, friends feeling sorry for you." I pulled out my phone, hands shaking, pulling up the emails. "To the Hartman Collection, to Angela Voss." "To." Dad grabbed my phone, glancing at it, then laughing. "These are the invoices you sent, not confirmation of payment. They probably never intended to pay. Just humoring you." He was wrong. The payments have already been processed. The checks were in my apartment, but they didn't know that. They also didn't know something else. "Where are the other paintings?" I asked, counting the ashes, the remnants. There were 43 pieces. "I see maybe 15 here. Of the big ones wouldn't fit in the pit," Mom said. "We took those to the dump this afternoon. Had to rent a truck. Cost us $80, by the way. You owe us." The dump. She'd taken the centerpiece of my exhibition, a 7 by 10-foot oil painting that had taken a year to complete, to the dump. "Get out," I said quietly. "This is our house." Dad laughed. "You get out and take this garbage artist fantasy with you." I left, drove home in a haze. Called the gallery, but they wouldn't answer. Called the collectors, but they'd already been told about my breakdown. Called my mentor, the established artist who'd gotten me the show, but she was in Paris and it was 5 a.m. there. I sat in my apartment, staring at the blank walls where my paintings should have been hanging for the pre-show tour tomorrow. Then I saw the package by my door. From Marcus, my ex-boyfriend who'd moved to Seattle 6 months ago. We'd broken up because my parents had convinced him I'd never amount to anything, that he was wasting his time. But we'd stayed friends. Inside was a hard drive and a note. Thought you might want these for your exhibition catalog. So proud of you. The hard drive contained something I'd forgotten about. Marcus was a photographer. He documented everything. Every painting, every sketch, every work in progress. 3,000 high-resolution images of my art, including detailed shots of all 43 pieces in the destroyed portfolio. But more importantly, there were videos. Him interviewing me about each piece, time-stamped, dated, showing the paintings in various stages of completion over the past 5 years. And at the bottom of the box, a USB with security footage from his old apartment's garage where I'd stored the paintings before moving them to my parents' place. Time-stamped footage showing every painting being moved, intact, just 3 days ago. I called my lawyer. Yes, I had one. Because this wasn't the first time my parents had tried to sabotage me, just the most extreme. They destroyed your work. Patricia's voice was sharp. The pieces that were already sold. Yes. That's destruction of property. Fraud. Defamation with the mental health claims. We can file criminal charges. There's more, I said. They took the biggest pieces to the dump this afternoon. They might still be there. I'll meet you there in an hour. Bring any documentation you have. The dump was closed, but Patricia knew someone. We got in with a security guard and flashlights at 2 a.m. And there, in the section for large items, were my paintings. 28 of them, including Metamorphosis, the 7x10 centerpiece. They were damaged, scratched, some torn, but they existed. Why aren't these burned? Patricia asked. The security guard checked the logs. Says here someone called about burning large items this afternoon. We don't allow fires that big. Told them to dump them instead. They tried to burn them all. The dump had saved my career by having fire regulations. We loaded everything into a rented truck. Some pieces were salvageable. Others would need restoration. But they existed. My year-long painting, despite a tear across the bottom corner, was mostly intact. At 6 a.m., I called Gallery Montrose. Told them everything. Sent them the videos from Marcus, the security footage, the photos of my parents by the fire pit that I'd taken without them noticing, the dump receipt with their names on it. The gallery owner, David Montrose, was silent for a long moment. Then, your parents did this? Your own parents? Yes. The opening is in 12 hours. I know. How many pieces can you restore by then? Maybe 10, 15 if I work nonstop. Do it. We'll adjust the exhibition. Call it Phoenix, Art Rising from Destruction. We'll display the damaged pieces alongside Marcus's photographs of the originals. Show the world what you've survived. But the mental health claims. I'll handle that. Dr. Morrison is about to learn what happens when you fabricate medical records. That's a felony, by the way. I spent the next 10 hours in a frenzy. 3 artist friends came to help. We stabilized tears, cleaned smoke damage, mounted what we could. Marcus flew in from Seattle with printed enlargements of his photographs. By 5 p.m. we had something. Not what I'd planned, but something more powerful. The gallery walls showed both versions, the photographs of complete works beside the damaged originals. The burned canvas fragments were displayed in glass cases like archaeological finds. The centerpiece, Metamorphosis, hung with its tear unrepaired, a black scar across the bottom that somehow made it more powerful. The opening was at 7 p.m. At 6:30, my parents arrived. They walked in like they owned the place, Mom in her charity gala dress, Dad in his power suit, Connor trailing behind. We're here to apologize for our daughter's behavior, Mom announced to David Montrose, and to discuss compensating you for any damages her mental episode may have. She stopped, saw the walls, saw the paintings, saw the photographs, saw the centerpiece display, a monitor playing security footage of them throwing my paintings into their truck, labeled The Destruction. 3:47 p.m., November 14th. What is this? Dad's face went white. This is my exhibition. I said, stepping out from behind a display panel. Phoenix, art from ashes, the story of how my own family tried to destroy my career because it didn't fit their image. You can't show this, Mom shrieked. This is defamation. Truth isn't defamation, Patricia said, appearing with 2 police officers. But filing false medical records is a crime, as is destruction of property valued over $50,000. $50,000? Connor scoffed. Her finger paintings aren't worth. David Montrose interrupted. Actually, the 3 pieces that were pre-sold were valued at $35,000 total. The entire collection was insured for $120,000. Would you like to see the paperwork? My parents stood frozen as the officers approached. Harrison and Margaret Brennan, you're under arrest for felony destruction of property, fraud, and conspiracy. This is ridiculous, Dad roared. I'm CFO off. A company that's about to see their executive arrested at an art gallery, David said, already typing on his phone. The art world is small, Mr. Brennan, but our reach is long. By tomorrow, everyone will know what you did. As they were let out in handcuffs, Mom turned to me. You've ruined us. No, I said. You ruined yourselves the moment you lit that match. The opening was a sensation, not just because of the art, but because of the story. Every piece sold. Not for sympathy, but because the story of their destruction and survival had transformed them into something more. The torn metamorphosis sold for $40,000, more than 3 times its original price. The New York Times ran a feature, Phoenix Rising, how one artist turned family betrayal into triumph. The criminal trial was quick. My parents pled guilty to lesser charges to avoid jail time. They got probation, community service, and were ordered to pay restitution, $120,000, the full insured value of the destroyed works. But the real price was higher. Dad was asked to resign as CFO, something about conduct unbecoming. Mom was removed from her charity boards. Connor, the golden child, found his Harvard law reputation tainted by association. Law firms Googled his name and found articles about his parents burning his sister's art. They tried to reconcile once, 6 months later, sent a letter through their lawyer saying they'd been stressed and misunderstood the value of my work. I sent back a photo of my new studio, bought with the money from the Phoenix exhibition. On the wall behind me hung Metamorphosis with its scar still unrepaired, now my signature piece, worth more than their house. I included a note, real jobs don't need paintings, but real artists don't need your approval. Last week, I opened my 5th solo exhibition. The theme was family portraits, abstract pieces inspired by trauma and healing. The centerpiece was a new 7 by 10 painting, a fire pit with canvases burning, but from the ashes, birds rising. Phoenixes. My parents weren't invited, but I heard from Connor that they saw the reviews. The Times called it a searing indictment of parental betrayal that transcends personal pain to become universal. Connor also mentioned they'd had to sell their house. The legal fees, the restitution, the lost income, it all added up. They're living in a 2-bedroom apartment now, the kind they used to mock me for having. They blame you, he said over coffee, one of his rare attempts at contact. They burned my life's work the night before my opening. They were trying to help. They were trying to control. There's a difference. He left, but not before buying one of my pieces, a small painting of a house on fire titled Home. Why this one? I asked as I wrapped it. Because it reminds me that sometimes things need to burn down before you can see what's really there. Maybe Connor learned something after all. My art now hangs in galleries across the country. The story of the Phoenix exhibition follows each piece, how destruction became creation, how betrayal became triumph. Critics say my work has a rawness and honesty that comes from survival. They're right, every painting carries the smoke of that fire pit. Every canvas remembers the flames. But more than that, they remember the rising. My parents thought they were burning garbage. Instead, they lit a fire that launched my career higher than their approval ever could have. They were right about one thing. Real jobs don't need paintings. But real life? Real life needs art that survives the fire. Art that refuses to stay ash. Art that rises. And I rose.
The email hit my inbox like a digital slap across the face. It wasn't an invitation, not really. It was a forwarded message from my Aunt Nadine, A single line of text above a glossy photo of my brother Taylor and his fiancée Soleil. Wedding details enclosed, RSVP by date. No personal note, no thinking of you, just a generic forward. My name, Jasmine, wasn't even on the original recipient list. I was 28 years old, and my brother Taylor, who was 30, was getting married. To Soleil, who was 29, and I, his only sister, hadn't received an invite, not even a digital one. My thumb hovered over Holly's contact. My mother, Holly Fox, 52, queen of appearances and architect of my exile. My stomach churned, a familiar mix of dread and bitter amusement. I knew what she'd say. I always knew. "Mum," I started, trying to keep my voice even when she finally answered. I just got Nadine's forwarded email about Taylor's wedding. Did my invitation get lost? There was a beat of silence, then her voice, saccharine sweet, dripped through the phone. "Oh, darling, you know how the mail is these days, so unreliable. Of course your invitation was sent. It must have gotten lost in the mail. Such a shame. We're so looking forward to seeing you." Lies, all of it. I could practically hear her practice smile. "Right," I said, my voice flat. "Lost in the mail, for a wedding that's in 2 days. Another pause. "Well, darling, these things happen. Just come. We'd love to have you. You know how much your brother wants you there." My brother, Taylor, the golden child, the one who watched me get pushed out of the family circle, piece by piece, and never once spoke up. He was complicit. He always had been. I hung up, the familiar ache in my chest tightening. I knew it wasn't lost in the mail. My mother had orchestrated this, just like she orchestrated everything. I opened Instagram, my fingers already knowing what they'd find. Emerson, one of my cousins, a social media influencer, had been posting non-stop. Sure enough, there it was. A carousel of photos from the rehearsal dinner. Everyone was there. My Aunt Nadine, looking uncomfortable in a silk dress. My other cousins, laughing, clinking champagne glasses. My mother, beaming next to Taylor and Soleil, looking every inch the proud matriarch. And me, Jasmine, nowhere to be seen. Not a single photo, not a single mention. It was like I didn't exist. It wasn't the first time. It never was. I scrolled past a photo of my mother and Taylor, their arms linked, both of them smiling for the camera. A memory, sharp and cold, cut through me. I was 15, a skinny, awkward teenager, standing in the grand foyer of my grandparents' house. It was a big family gathering, one of those annual Fox family events where everyone dressed up and pretended to be perfect. My cousin, Mark, had stolen a valuable antique locket from my grandmother's display cabinet. He was 16, a year older than me, and a known troublemaker, but he was also my aunt's favourite. When the locket went missing, my grandmother, bless her heart, was devastated. My mother, Holly, had taken me aside. Her eyes narrowed. "Jasmine," she'd whispered, "you were seen near the cabinet. Mark said he saw you. Just admit it, darling. It'll be easier." I was stunned. But I didn't. I was outside with Nadine. Holly had just smiled, a chilling, placid smile. "Perhaps you don't remember clearly. A moment of weakness. It happens." She'd convinced the family. She'd convinced my father, who was too busy with his business to question her. She'd convinced Taylor, who just looked at me with a blank, unreadable expression. I was blamed. The scandal of the stolen locket, which I had nothing to do with, became my cross to bear. It was the beginning of my exile, the reason I became the family's black sheep. Over the years, every minor transgression, every forgotten birthday, every missed family gathering was attributed to that incident, to my rebellious nature. It was easier for them to have a scapegoat than to admit one of their golden children was flawed. Now, 13 years later, at 28, I was still paying the price. My phone buzzed, pulling me back to the present. It was Nadine. My aunt, Nadine McBride, 55, the only one who still secretly reached out, her compassion always warring with her fear of Holly. "Jasmine," she whispered, her voice barely audible, laced with urgency. "I had nothing to do with this, I swear. Your mother told them not to send you an invite. There's something she's hiding." Nadine's whispered words. "Your mother told them not to send you an invite. There's something she's hiding," echoed in my ears long after the call ended. My hands clenched. It wasn't just about the wedding anymore. It was about the truth, about the years of gaslighting, the quiet erasure, the way they'd made me feel like I was crazy for seeing what was right in front of me. I didn't hesitate. I pulled up a flight tracker and found the earliest flight to the city where the wedding venue was located. It was a small, exclusive resort town, a place my mother loved for its discretion and old money charm. The flight was for the next morning. I booked it, then found a room at the resort under my middle name, Marie. It felt like a small act of rebellion, a way to be there without being there. The next morning, I was on that plane. The resort was exactly as I'd imagined, sprawling manicured lawns, fountains, and stone pathways leading to grand ballrooms. I checked in, careful to avoid the main lobby where I might run into someone. My room was on the 3rd floor, with a balcony overlooking one of the smaller courtyards. From there, I had a decent vantage point of the main thoroughfare where guests were beginning to mill about. I spent the afternoon observing. The pre-wedding mixer was scheduled for that evening, a casual gathering for early arrivals. I saw my mother, Holly, in a flowing silk dress, her smile fixed, her posture ramrod straight. She moved through the crowd like a queen, greeting guests, her arm often linked with Taylor's. Taylor, 30, looked tired, his usual easy smile a little strained around the edges. Soleil, 29, was stunning, as always, her blonde hair catching the light, her laughter a little too loud sometimes. Even from a distance I could feel the tension simmering beneath their practiced smiles. I saw Holly pull Taylor aside, her voice low and sharp, her hand gripping his arm. Taylor nodded, looking uncomfortable, glancing over at Soleil, who was talking animatedly to a group of her bridesmaids. A few minutes later, Soleil walked over to them, her smile faltering as Holly gave her a look that could curdle milk. They were a perfect picture of familial bliss, if you didn't look too closely. It reminded me of when Taylor and I were kids. He was 2 years older than me, my protector, my confidant. We'd spend hours building elaborate forts in the woods behind our house, sharing secrets under the covers with a flashlight. He was the only one who truly understood me, who didn't judge. But as we got older, Holly started her work. She'd praised Taylor endlessly for his achievements, for being responsible, for understanding the family's expectations. She'd subtly, then not so subtly, contrast him with me, the free spirit, the dreamer, the one who needed to learn how the world worked. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, a wedge formed. He started spending more time with his friends, less with me. He stopped defending me when Holly made her veiled criticisms. By the time the locket incident happened when I was 15, he was already on her side, or at least too afraid to be on mine. He became the golden child, and I became the black sheep. As the mixer continued, I saw Cash Sullivan, 31, Taylor's best friend and best man, join the group. Cash was charismatic, always had been, but there was a toxic edge to him, a smirk that never quite reached his eyes. He clapped Taylor on the back, then turned to Soleil, leaning in close, too close. He said something, and Soleil laughed, a little too quickly, her eyes darting towards Taylor. Taylor was distracted, talking to a distant cousin, but I saw the flicker of something in Soleil's eyes, a mix of discomfort and something else, something almost like recognition. I moved closer, blending into the shadows near a large potted plant, pretending to check my phone. Cash and Soleil had moved slightly away from the main group, their heads together. "You really think you can pull this off?" Cash murmured, his voice low but clear enough in the quiet hum of the background music. Soleil bit her lip. It's happening, isn't it? Taylor loves me. Cash scoffed, a soft, almost imperceptible sound. Loves the idea of you, the perfect bride, if he ever finds out what we did in Aspen. He paused, then finished. It's over. My breath hitched. Aspen. My fingers flew to my phone, pressing record. My heart pounded against my ribs. This wasn't just about a lost invitation. This was about a secret, and I had just caught the first whisper of it, the recording of Cash's whisper. If he ever finds out what we did in Aspen, it's over, played on a loop in my mind. Aspen, that was the key. I retreated to my room, the adrenaline still thrumming through my veins. The first thing I did was pull up old social media posts, specifically looking for anything tagged with Aspen from Taylor, Soleil, or Cash. It took some digging. Taylor 30 wasn't a huge poster, but Soleil 29 was. I scrolled back, past engagement announcements and bachelorette parties, to about a year and a half ago. There it was, a series of photos from an Aspen ski trip. Taylor was in some of them, bundled up on the slopes, but then there were a few days where his posts stopped. His last photo showed him at an airport, a caption about a last-minute business trip. Then, a few days later, Soleil posted a picture of herself by a fireplace, a mug in her hands captioned, "Cozy nights in Aspen. So glad some people decided to stay behind." Cash, 31, had commented, "Couldn't leave paradise, could we?" And Soleil had replied, "Never." No Taylor in sight. It wasn't definitive proof, but it was a strong lead. They were off the grid, while Taylor was out of town. The pieces were starting to fit. The next morning, the day before the wedding, I put on a confident smile and walked down to the resort's main office. "Hi," I said to the event coordinator, a harried-looking woman named Brenda. "I'm Jasmine Fox. I'm a distant cousin of the groom, Taylor Fox. I just wanted to double-check my seating arrangement for the wedding tomorrow. My mother, Holly, tends to make last-minute changes, and I want to make sure I'm not accidentally at the kids' table again." I gave a light, self-deprecating laugh. Brenda, clearly overwhelmed, barely looked up. "Fox wedding, right? Let me see." She pulled up a digital guest list. I leaned in, pretending to peer at the screen. My eyes scanned the list, looking for Jasmine Fox. My name wasn't there, not even misspelled, not even a J Fox. It was like I'd been completely erased. It confirmed what Nadine had said, what I already knew. My mother hadn't just forgotten to send an invite. She had actively ensured I wasn't on the list at all. The realization was a cold, hard knot in my stomach. It brought back the familiar sting of childhood isolation. After the locket incident, my mother had slowly but surely isolated me. Family gatherings became a minefield. My cousins, once my playmates, were encouraged to keep their distance. "Jasmine needs to learn responsibility," Holly would say, loud enough for me to hear. "She's a bad influence." I spent countless hours in my room, reading, drawing, creating my own worlds because the real one had become so unwelcoming. Taylor, my brother, my former confidant, would sometimes sneak me a cookie or a comic book, a silent apology, but he never dared to challenge Holly openly. He was already too deeply entrenched in her narrative. I left Brenda's office, the guest list confirming my non-existence, and began to explore the venue. I wasn't just looking for a place to hide, I was looking for a vantage point. The main ballroom, where the ceremony would be held, was grand, with high ceilings and ornate balconies. I found a service staircase that led up to a narrow walkway above the main seating area. From there I could see everything, but remain largely unseen. It was perfect. A small, almost hidden alcove, just large enough for one person to stand. I pictured the scene, the rows of guests, the altar, Taylor and Soleil, and me, above them, a ghost in the machine. Later that day, as the resort buzzed with final wedding preparations, I was back in my room, scrolling through Emerson's Instagram. She just posted a photo from the bride's breakfast, a pre-wedding brunch. It was a picture of a mimosa toast, Soleil, Cash, and a few other close friends. The hashtags, though, were what caught my eye. Tschint Aspen vibes. Up private villa. Toliercholt. Before the proposal. Before the proposal. Cash and Soleil, alone, at a private villa in Aspen, before Taylor even proposed. The recording from Cash, the timeline of Taylor's business trip, and now Emerson's unwitting clue. It wasn't just a drunken fling. This was something significant, something that happened before the engagement. My mother's desperate need to silence me, to erase me, suddenly made a terrifying kind of sense. She wasn't just hiding a mailing error. She was hiding a truth that could shatter everything. The phrase "before the proposal" from Emerson's hashtag echoed in my head, a siren's call. This wasn't just a secret, it was a foundational lie. Soleil, 29, and Cash, 31, had been together, or at least intimately involved, before Taylor, 30, had even proposed. My mother, Holly, 52, must have known. This was why I was erased. I was the one who saw too much, who asked too many questions. I spent the rest of the day, the eve of the wedding, meticulously drafting my plan. I wouldn't shout, wouldn't make a scene in the traditional sense. That would be too easy for them to dismiss, to frame as my usual rebellious outburst. No, I would use their own tactics against them. Silence, insinuation, and a single devastating truth. My plan was simple, precise. I would wait for the moment, that hallowed pause in every wedding ceremony, when the officiant asks, "If anyone here knows any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace." That's when I would speak. Not a long speech, not an accusation, just one name. Cash. I rehearsed it in my head over and over. Cash. The single syllable, sharp and clear. I imagined Soleil's reaction, Taylor's confusion, Holly's horror. It would be enough. It had to be. A memory resurfaced, unbidden from years ago. I was 20, home from college for the summer. Taylor had just started dating Soleil. They were at a family barbecue, and I'd wandered into the kitchen for a drink. Cash, Taylor's best friend, was there, laughing, a little too loud, a little too close to Soleil. They'd both had too much to drink. I remembered Soleil giggling, leaning into Cash's space, and Cash's hand lingering on her arm for a beat too long. It was just a fleeting moment, easily dismissed as drunken flirtation, but something about it had felt off, a spark that wasn't just friendly. I'd mentioned it to Taylor later, casually. Soleil and Cash seemed pretty chummy tonight. Taylor had just shrugged. "They're friends, Jazz. Cash is my best friend. Don't be weird." And Holly, ever vigilant, had overheard. She'd pulled me aside, her voice low and menacing. "Jasmine, you will not spread rumours about Taylor's girlfriend. Do you understand? You will ruin everything. You always do." I had dropped it, of course. What else could I do? No one would have believed me anyway. I was the girl who stole the locket, the one who always caused trouble. My words held no weight in the Fox family. Now, 7 years later, the pieces were finally clicking into place. That wasn't just drunken flirting. That was a continuation of something that had started long before. As night fell, the resort grew quiet. Most guests were already asleep, preparing for the big day. I was still awake, my mind buzzing. I decided to take one last reconnaissance mission, checking the service staircase to the balcony. As I passed a utility closet, I heard a faint, distorted sound. It sounded like a phone, playing a voicemail on speaker. The door was slightly ajar. Curiosity overriding caution, I nudged the door open a crack. Inside, a cleaning cart was parked, and on its shelf a resort-issued phone, the kind staff used, was playing a message. It was Cash's voice, slurred, clearly drunk. "Soleil, it's me. Cash, look, I know it's late, but I couldn't sleep. Thinking about tomorrow, thinking about Aspen. We could have been something, you know, something real. But I guess lies win weddings, huh? Just call me before it's too late. The voicemail ended with a click. My blood ran cold. He was drunk, yes, but the words were unmistakable. We could have been something. Lies win weddings. It wasn't just a brief fling. This was a deeper connection, a history that Soleil had chosen to bury for the sake of a perfect life with Taylor. And Cash, clearly, was still carrying a torch, or at least a bitter resentment. My hand trembled as I pulled out my phone. I pressed record, holding it up to the door, capturing the tail end of the voicemail, the distinct tone of the resort phone, and the silence that followed. This wasn't just a whisper anymore. This was a confession, and it was exactly what I needed. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, almost mockingly perfect. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the quiet hum of the resort. Today was the day. Today, the silence would break. I dressed simply, in dark, unassuming clothes, a practical choice for blending into the shadows. I had no intention of being seen, not until the precise moment. I slipped out of my room, avoiding the main corridors, and made my way to the service staircase I'd scouted yesterday. It led directly to the upper balcony overlooking the main ballroom, where the ceremony was set to take place. The ballroom was already filling up. Guests dressed in their finest murmured excitedly, their voices a low drone that slowly faded as the live violinist began to play. The music, a classical piece, swelled through the grand space, adding to the surreal atmosphere. I saw my mother, Holly, 52, in a magnificent gown, her face a mask of serene joy as she greeted arriving guests. Taylor, 30, stood at the altar, looking nervous but undeniably handsome in his tuxedo. Cash, 31, his best man, stood beside him, a forced smile on his face. He looked a little rough around the edges, clearly still feeling the effects of last night's drinking. Soleil, 29, made her entrance, gliding down the aisle on her father's arm. She was breathtaking, a vision in white lace, her blonde hair styled perfectly. Her smile was radiant, but I saw a flicker of something in her eyes as she passed Cash, a fleeting moment of apprehension, quickly masked. I watched from my hidden alcove on the balcony, my breath held tight. The ceremony began. The officiant spoke, his voice resonating through the room. Taylor and Soleil exchanged loving glances, their vows beginning. It was all so perfect, so pristine, a carefully constructed facade. My hand tightened on the railing. This was it. The moment was approaching. The officiant reached the traditional part of the ceremony, his voice clear and resonant. If anyone here knows any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now, or forever hold your peace. A hush fell over the room. This was the moment everyone waited for, a dramatic pause, usually followed by nothing but the rustle of fabric and the quiet sighs of relief. Not today. My voice, usually quiet, projected with a clarity I hadn't known I possessed. It cut through the silence like a knife, echoing slightly in the vast space. Cash. It was just one word. A single, simple name, but the effect was immediate, devastating. Soleil, who had just begun to recite her vows, recoiled violently. Her eyes, wide with horror, snapped to Cash. The delicate bouquet of white roses she held slipped from her trembling fingers, hitting the polished floor with a soft thud. Gasps rippled through the guests, a wave of confusion and shock. Heads turned, searching for the source of the voice. Taylor, who had been looking at Soleil with adoration, frowned. His confusion quickly morphed into fury as he followed Soleil's terrified gaze to Cash. Cash, for his part, had gone ashen, his eyes fixed on Soleil, a look of pure, unadulterated panic on his face. The silence that followed my single word was deafening, thick with unspoken questions and dawning realization. It stretched agonizingly for what felt like an eternity. Then Soleil, her face chalk white, bolted. She didn't run down the aisle. She turned and fled, pushing past her bridesmaids, her white dress a blur as she disappeared out a side door. Taylor's eyes, blazing with betrayal, locked onto Cash. Without a word, he lunged, a guttural roar tearing from his throat. A sickening thud echoed through the stunned silence as Taylor's fist connected with Cash's jaw. Cash staggered back, clutching his face, a trickle of blood appearing at the corner of his mouth. "You bastard!" Taylor roared, his voice raw with pain and rage. "What did you do?" Chaos erupted. Guests screamed. Holly, her face contorted in a mask of horror, rushed forward, shouting Taylor's name. The wedding was halted. The perfect facade had shattered into a million pieces, and I, Jasmine, remained hidden, watching the beautiful chaos unfold. Chaos erupted below me. The elegant ballroom, moments ago filled with the soft strains of violins and hushed anticipation, was now a cacophony of shouts, gasps, and frantic movement. Holly, 52, was screaming Taylor's name, trying to pull him off Cash, 31, who was now sprawled on the floor, clutching his jaw. Guests were on their feet, some rushing forward, others recoiling in shock. The officiant stood frozen, his mouth agape. I remained hidden in my alcove, watching the beautiful implosion. My heart was still thundering, but a strange sense of calm settled over me. It was done. The truth, or at least a sliver of it, was out. Suddenly, a hand touched my arm. I whirled around, startled, ready to defend myself, but it was Nadine, 55, my aunt. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and something else, a grim satisfaction. "Jasmine," she whispered, her voice trembling but firm. "You have to go. Now." "Before they see you." She glanced down at the unfolding scene, then back at me. "It's not just Soleil. There are other things Holly didn't want anyone to know." Before I could ask, she pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand. "This is for you. I found it. It's old, but it explains everything." Her eyes darted around nervously. "Go, I'll cover for you." I nodded, clutching the paper. I trusted Nadine. She had always been the only one who saw me, truly saw me, even if she was too afraid to act openly. I slipped away through the service staircase, leaving the pandemonium behind. I found a quiet corner in a deserted lounge, my hands shaking slightly as I unfolded the paper Nadine had given me. It was an email, dated roughly 2 years ago, from Holly to Soleil, 29. The subject line was chilling. "Our agreement." My eyes scanned the text, my breath catching in my throat. Soleil. "I understand your distress, but we had an agreement. This cannot come out. It would destroy Taylor's reputation, and by extension our family's standing. You said you took care of it. The doctor's visit was discreet, I ensured that. The money I've provided should be more than sufficient to ensure your silence and your cooperation. As for the other matter, Cash is no longer a concern. He understands the gravity of the situation. We have a perfect future for you and Taylor planned. And as long as we silence Jasmine, no one will believe her. She's already known for her troubles. It will be easy to dismiss anything she says as vindictiveness. Just focus on the wedding. Everything will be fine." Holly. My vision blurred. The doctor's visit, the money. As long as we silence Jasmine, no one will believe her. It wasn't just about the Aspen affair, it was about a pregnancy Soleil had with Cash, and Holly had known. She had paid Soleil to keep it quiet, to preserve Taylor's image, to ensure her golden son's perfect life. And she had actively framed my past rebellion, my troubles, as a convenient distraction, a way to discredit me should I ever stumble upon the truth. I heard shouting from the ballroom, closer now. I peered out. Taylor, 30, had finally been pulled off Cash. He was confronting Soleil, who had reappeared, looking utterly devastated. Their voices carried, raw and unfiltered. "What did he mean, Soleil?" Taylor roared, his face contorted in agony. "What did you do with cash in Aspen?" Soleil, sobbing, finally broke. "It was just a mistake, Taylor. Before we were engaged. We were drunk. It was stupid." "A mistake?" Taylor's voice was laced with disbelief and fury. "And the rest of it? The whispers? The money Mum gave you?" Soleil flinched. She just wanted to help. It was a long time ago. I was pregnant, Taylor. And it was his. The words hung in the air, heavy and damning. My stomach clenched. It wasn't just a fling. It was a secret child, gone, paid for, erased. And Holly, 52, my mother, had known. She had orchestrated the cover-up, the lies, the framing of her own daughter to protect her son's image. The locket, my rebellious nature, my years of exile. It was all a carefully constructed smokescreen. Taylor stumbled back, as if punched again. He looked from Soleil to Holly, who stood rigid, her face pale but defiant. The truth, ugly and undeniable, was finally out. The wedding was over. The perfect Fox family facade had crumbled, and I, Jasmine, had been the one to strike the match. The email from Holly, 52, to Soleil, 29, confirming the pregnancy, the payment, and the deliberate silencing of me, Jasmine, 28, felt like a physical weight in my hands. I grappled with the enormity of what I'd done. I hadn't just interrupted a wedding, I'd detonated a bomb within the carefully constructed world of the Fox family. The family I once loved, the one that had systematically exiled me, was now crumbling, exposed and raw. I heard the frantic shouts of my mother, Holly, trying desperately to contain the fallout. She was still in the ballroom, her voice sharp, authoritative, trying to control the narrative even as it spiraled out of her grasp. I imagined her, face flushed, trying to shoo away curious guests, whispering threats to a sobbing Soleil, and probably trying to physically restrain Taylor, 30, who was undoubtedly still reeling. My Aunt Nadine, 55, true to her word, was already at work. I saw her later from a distance, talking in hushed, urgent tones to other relatives, her eyes darting towards the chaos in the ballroom. She was carefully leaking parts of the truth, the details she knew, ensuring that Holly's carefully crafted image would be shattered beyond repair within their elite social circle. Nadine was compassionate, but she also had a quiet sense of justice, and she was tired of Holly's manipulations. I knew I had to confront Holly one last time, not for an apology, not for reconciliation, for closure, for myself. I found her in a private lounge, away from the main wedding guests, her face pale, her perfect hair slightly dishevelled. She was on the phone, her voice low and furious, clearly trying to manage the public relations disaster. She hung up abruptly when she saw me, her eyes narrowing. "Jasmine!" she hissed, her voice laced with venom. "How dare you? How could you do this? You've ruined everything. You've always been so vindictive, so determined to destroy what we've built." I held up the email, her words, her signature, a damning testament. Vindictive? Is that what you call it? Or is it finally being loud enough to be heard? My voice was steady, calm, a stark contrast to her fury. "You didn't just forget to send an invite, Mom. You erased me. You used my past, the lie about the locket, to discredit me. All to cover up this." I gestured to the email. A secret child, a payment. All to protect Taylor's image. Her eyes flickered to the email, then back to me, a flicker of fear in their depths. "You don't understand the complexities, Jasmine. This was for Taylor's future, for the family's standing. Some things are necessary." "Necessary?" I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping me. "You sacrificed your own daughter to maintain a lie. You taught me silence, Mom. You taught me what it feels like to be voiceless, to be blamed for things I didn't do, to be constantly gaslit. And now you know what it feels like when the truth finally screams." She opened her mouth to argue, but then Taylor walked in, his face bruised from the fight with Cash, his eyes red-rimmed. He looked at me, then at Holly, then at the email in my hand. He must have heard some of the commotion, some of the truth. "Jazz," he said, his voice hoarse, "is it true, all of it, Soleil and Cash and the baby?" I just looked at him, my brother, the golden child. The one who had stood by and watched me be exiled. "Ask Mom," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "She knows all the complexities." Taylor turned to Holly, his face a mixture of pain and dawning realization. "You knew?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "You knew about all of it, and you let me believe." He trailed off, shaking his head. Then the micro twist. I suspected something," Taylor admitted, his voice barely a whisper, his eyes fixed on the floor. "About Soleil and Cash. There were always little things, but I wanted it to be true so badly. The perfect family, the perfect wife. My need for acceptance was greater than the truth." He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a raw, desperate apology. "I'm so sorry, Jazz, for everything." It wasn't enough to heal 13 years of pain, but it was something. A crack in his golden facade, a moment of genuine vulnerability. I looked at my mother, her face a mask of defeat and fury. I looked at my brother, finally seeing the cracks in his perfect world, and in that moment, an emotional high point, I realized something profound. I didn't want their approval anymore. I didn't need it. Their world was built on lies, on appearances, on silencing anyone who threatened their perfect narrative. And I was finally free of it. I turned and walked out of the lounge, leaving them to their shattered reality. The weight was gone. I had been heard, and that was all that mattered. Weeks passed since the wedding implosion. The silence from my family was absolute, a stark contrast to the deafening chaos I'd left behind. I didn't hear from Holly, 52, or Taylor, 30. Not a text, not a call. It was as if I had vanished, just as they had always wanted. But this time it was on my terms. The wedding, as expected, was officially annulled within days. The Fox family, usually so adept at burying scandals, couldn't contain this one. Too many witnesses, too much public drama. The story, albeit sanitized, spread like wildfire through their elite social circles. Soleil, 29, disappeared from social media entirely. Her perfect life, built on a foundation of lies and my mother's money, had shattered. I heard through Nadine, 55, that Soleil had moved back to her hometown, far from the city and the judgmental eyes of the Fox family's acquaintances. Cash, 31, Taylor's best man and former best friend, was ostracized. His once charming reputation was in tatters, replaced by whispers of betrayal and deceit. He lost his job, his social standing, everything. Karma, it seemed, had a swift and brutal hand for those who built their lives on others' pain. Taylor, the golden child, couldn't bear to remain in the gilded cage of my mother's home. Nadine told me he moved out a few weeks after the wedding, getting his own apartment across town. He hadn't cut ties with Holly entirely, that would be too radical for him, but the perfect son facade had cracked. He was still processing the depth of his mother's manipulation and the fact that he had been so blind, so willing to believe the narrative she spun. His need for acceptance had indeed been greater than the truth, and now he was living with the consequences of that choice. Holly's spotless reputation, the one she had guarded so fiercely, was stained. Not publicly, not in the tabloids, but within the insular world she cared about most. The whispers followed her. The perfect matriarch, the woman who orchestrated everything, was now seen as a manipulator, a woman who would sacrifice anything, even her own children's happiness and truth, for appearances. Her social calendar thinned. Invitations became scarce. The power she wielded, built on an illusion of perfection, had significantly diminished. I, Jasmine, 28, returned to my own city, to my quiet apartment, and to my life. The storm had passed, leaving behind a strange calm. I didn't feel triumphant, not exactly. More like a weight had been lifted. The years of carrying their secret, their blame, had finally ended. I started focusing on my freelance writing, something I'd always loved but never fully pursued. I found a new clarity in my words, a sharp edge honed by years of being silenced. One evening, I started writing about my experience. Not about the specifics of the wedding, not about names, but about the feeling of being erased, of being gaslit, of fighting for your own truth against a powerful manipulative force. I posted it anonymously on a popular online forum, a Reddit-style story, raw and honest. It went viral. The internet, surprisingly, sided with me. Strangers from around the world resonated with the feeling of being misunderstood, of fighting against a family's narrative. Comments poured in, offering support, sharing similar stories. It was validating in a way I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't about revenge, it was about being seen, finally, by people who understood. A month or so after the wedding, I was walking through a local park, enjoying the crisp autumn air. I passed a small wedding ceremony, a simple affair under a gazebo. The bride and groom exchanged vows, their faces alight with genuine joy. The officiant reached the familiar line, "Speak now or forever hold your peace." I didn't flinch. I didn't feel the urge to speak. I simply smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. My karma wasn't about disrupting someone else's happiness anymore. It was about finding my own. It was about the truth I'd unearthed, the lies that had been exposed, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that the universe, in its own way, had balanced the scales. Karma didn't need me anymore. It was already at work, a slow, inevitable force. They taught me silence. I taught them what it sounds like when the truth finally screams.
Okay, here's how it all started. Not with a bang, but with a piece of paper taped to my apartment door. I remember it so clearly. It was a Tuesday, late afternoon. I'd just gotten home from physical therapy, still moving a little stiffly 3 months out from my surgery. The mail was usually just junk, but this envelope was thick, official-looking, and had my landlord's logo. My heart started thumping before I even opened it. Eviction notice. The words hit me like a physical blow. My rent check had bounced. I stared at it, then at the date. It was for this month. My rent always went out like clockwork. I'm meticulous with my finances, always have been. My emergency fund was robust. My checking account always had a healthy buffer. This made no sense. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers shaking a little as I logged into my banking app. It took a moment for the numbers to load, and then I saw it. The balance. It wasn't just low. It was a gaping black hole. My checking account, which usually held around $12,000 for rent, bills, and a cushion, was sitting at a pathetic $347, and my savings? Gone. All of it. Every single one of the $11,000 I'd painstakingly saved over years. My breath hitched. $11,000 just vanished. My mind immediately flashed back 3 months. The surgery. It had been major, a long recovery. I'm Brinley, by the way, 29 years old, and up until that Tuesday I thought I had my life pretty well sorted. Independent. Maybe a little too much so, especially when it came to my family. But after the operation, I was practically bedridden for weeks. My mom, Patricia, then 54, had offered to help. She'd always been the martyr type, the one who sacrificed everything for her children. I'd been hesitant, but I was in no state to argue. I'd given her limited access to my debit card and online banking login, strictly for groceries, prescriptions, and maybe a few takeout meals. Nothing else. I'd made that crystal clear. "Just enough to keep me alive, Mom," I'd joked weakly from my hospital bed. She'd smiled, patted my hand, and promised. Now, looking at my bank statement, that promise felt like a punch to the gut. I scrolled through the transactions, my eyes blurring. Large withdrawals, multiple transfers to unfamiliar accounts, charges from places I'd never heard of. It was a blur of numbers, each one a fresh stab. I called Patricia. My voice was tight, strained. "Mom, my rent check bounced. What happened to my money?" There was a pause on the other end, a little too long. Then her voice, smooth and practiced. "Oh, Brinley, honey, don't worry about it. It was for the family, a family emergency. You were so out of it after the surgery, I didn't want to burden you." "A family emergency," I repeated, my grip tightening on the phone. "What kind of emergency costs $11,000? And why didn't you tell me?" "It was complicated, sweetie. You'll understand when you have your own husband one day and a family to take care of," she said, her tone dismissive, as if my single status somehow invalidated my right to my own money. "It's all handled now. Just a little hiccup. We'll talk about it later." And then, just like that, she changed the subject, asking about my physical therapy, how I was sleeping. The classic Patricia maneuver: deflect, gaslight, then pivot to being the caring mother. I ended the call feeling hollowed out, but something in her voice, that practiced calm, set off alarm bells. I went back to my banking app, scrolling further, looking for anything that wasn't groceries or prescriptions. And there it was, a transaction that made my stomach clench. Serenity Spa and Wellness Center, VIP package. Dated 3 days after my operation. 3 days after I was cut open, doped up, and barely able to lift my head. This wasn't about groceries. This wasn't about a family emergency. This was something else entirely. And I was going to find out exactly what. The eviction notice and that spa charge had me reeling, but not for long. My initial shock quickly morphed into a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't going to just sit there and let Patricia's vague, family emergency excuse float in the air. I needed facts. And for facts, I called Robin. Robin Harper, 31, has been my best friend since college, and conveniently, she's also a financial advisor. She's sharp, no nonsense, and has seen me through enough family drama to know when I'm not just venting, but genuinely needing a battle plan. I called her the moment I saw that spa charge. "They drained your account, Brinley?" she asked, her voice tight with disbelief, after I'd laid out the bare bones of it. $11,000? While you were recovering? Every last cent of my savings, and most of my checking, I confirmed, my voice flat. And my landlord isn't happy. I need to figure out where it went, exactly. Robin was at my apartment within the hour, armed with her laptop and a serious expression. We sat at my kitchen table, my bank statements spread out like a morbid treasure map. She pulled up the digital versions on her screen, cross-referencing, highlighting. "Okay, let's start from 3 months ago, the day after your surgery," she said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Here's that Serenity Spa charge you mentioned, $450, VIP couples package. Interesting." My stomach churned. A couples package, while I was lying in a hospital bed. We scrolled. The pattern emerged quickly, and it wasn't pretty. There were large withdrawals, yes, but also a string of direct purchases. A Form $200 charge from Elite Furnishings, another for $800 from Bridal Bliss Boutique, multiple charges for high-end restaurants, concert tickets, even a series of Uber rides that ended at various upscale hotels across the city. This wasn't a family emergency. This was a shopping spree. "Wait," Robin said, pointing at a transaction. "Who's Emiliano Wright? There are several transfers to an account under that name, and a few Venmo payments." My blood ran cold. Emiliano Wright. That was Paris's new husband. My younger sister, Paris 26, had just gotten married a few months ago. Her wedding had been a ridiculously lavish affair, far beyond what Emiliano, a junior marketing manager, could afford, and even beyond what Paris, a part-time yoga instructor, could contribute. Patricia had been vague about how they were funding it all, just saying she was helping out. I'd been too focused on my own recovery to pay much attention. "Emiliano is Paris's husband," I told Robin, my voice barely a whisper. "They just got back from their honeymoon in Greece." Robin's eyes narrowed. "Greece, huh? Let's see. Ah, here we go. A $3,000 transfer to Travel Luxe Agency 2 weeks before their wedding, and a $1,500 charge for Athens Grand Hotel around the same time." It was all starting to click into place, a sickeningly clear picture. My money hadn't gone to some crisis. It had gone to fund my sister's extravagant lifestyle. "I need to see Paris," I decided, pushing my chair back. Not to confront her, just to talk. See what she says. The next day, I called Paris. "Hey, sis," I said, trying to sound casual. "Haven't properly caught up since the wedding. How about coffee?" She agreed, sounding genuinely pleased. We met at a trendy cafe downtown. Paris, always dramatic and entitled, was radiating newlywed bliss. She immediately launched into a monologue about her honeymoon. "Oh, Brinley, Greece was divine," she gushed, sipping her latte. "Emiliano and I had the most incredible time. We did a private yacht tour around Santorini, and the spa at our hotel was out of this world. We even got this amazing couples package, all massages and facials. It was exactly what we needed after all the wedding stress." She pulled out her phone, swiping through photos. Glittering blue water, whitewashed buildings, and then a selfie of her and Emiliano, wrapped in plush robes, looking utterly relaxed. The background clearly showed the interior of a high-end spa. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my face neutral. "Sounds amazing," I managed. "Must have cost a fortune." Paris waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, you know, Mom. She helped us out. Said it was a wedding gift, a little something extra to make sure we had the perfect start. She's always so generous." Generous with my money, I thought, a cold fury building inside me. I nodded, feigning interest as she continued to brag about their new espresso machine, not on any registry, I noted, and the designer couch they'd just bought for their new apartment. When I got home, I pulled up my bank statements again. I zoomed in on the Serenity Spa and Wellness Center charge from 3 months ago, and there it was, in the small print below the transaction details, a line I hadn't noticed before. Customer, Brinley Hamilton. And below that, a confirmation number for a VIP couples spa package. It wasn't just a random spa charge. It was a charge under my name for a couples package used while I was incapacitated. And Paris had just described her amazing couples package in Greece. The pieces clicked with a sickening finality. This wasn't a family emergency. This was a calculated theft, disguised as a gift, funded by my life savings. And they hadn't even bothered to hide it properly. The rage I felt after that conversation with Paris, after seeing my own name on that spa receipt, was a cold, quiet kind of fury. It wasn't the kind that made me want to scream or throw things. It was the kind that made me want to sit down, make a list, and methodically dismantle everything. But first, I needed to test the waters with Patricia again. I called her a couple of days later, trying to keep my voice light, almost confused. "Hey, Mom," I started. "I was just looking through my bank statements, trying to figure out what happened with the rent check. There are a few charges I don't recognize, like this one from Elite Furnishings for $1,200, and a few transfers to an Emiliano Wright." There was a beat of silence on her end. Then, her voice dripping with feigned concern. "Oh, honey, don't you worry your pretty little head about those things. As I told you, it was a family matter, a very sensitive one. You were just so unwell after your surgery. I handled it all for you. It's all taken care of." "But, Mom, it's my money," I pressed, trying to sound genuinely perplexed, not accusatory. "And it's a lot of money. I just need to understand what happened. I'm trying to get my finances back in order." She sighed, a long put-upon sound that always meant she was about to play the martyr. "Brinley, you're 29 years old. You're single. You don't have a husband, a family of your own to worry about. You'll understand when you have your own husband one day, and real responsibilities. Sometimes family has to help family, and it's not always convenient. I did what I had to do for us." "For us?" I repeated, my voice still carefully neutral. "Or for Paris and Emiliano?" Another sigh. "Honestly, Brinley, you're being dramatic. You're recovered now, aren't you? The money is gone. Let's just move on. I don't want to talk about this anymore. It was stressful enough dealing with it while you were sick." The conversation ended there, as they always did when Patricia didn't want to be questioned. Her deflection was a brick wall, but her words confirmed everything I suspected. "You'll understand when you have your own husband one day." It was her classic dismissal, designed to make me feel immature and alone, and to justify her actions by implying I didn't have a real family yet. But her words also solidified my resolve. I wasn't going to move on. I was going to document every single cent. I bought a new binder, a pack of colored tabs, and a ream of paper. I printed out every single bank statement, every credit card transaction from the past 6 months. I highlighted every suspicious charge, every large withdrawal, every transfer to Emiliano's account. I cross-referenced them with dates, times, and notes from my conversations with Patricia and Paris. I took screenshots of Paris's social media posts about her honeymoon, her new furniture, her espresso machine. I was building a case, not for a screaming match, but for a quiet, irrefutable presentation of facts. Robin came over again a few days later, bringing coffee and a fresh perspective. She watched me methodically organize my binder, tabs sticking out at every angle. "You're going full detective, aren't you?" she observed, a hint of admiration in her voice. "Someone has to," I muttered, circling a charge for a high-end appliance store. "They're not even trying to hide it. It's like they think I'm too stupid or too sick to notice." "They probably do," Robin said grimly. "Patricia's always been good at making you feel like you're overreacting." "But this isn't an overreaction, Bryn. This is theft. And it's not the first time she's pulled something like this, is it?" I paused. "What do you mean?" Well, remember when your grandmother died? Your maternal grandmother, I mean. She left that trust fund, didn't she? The one Patricia always said was for the family, but only she could access. You were still in high school then, right? I nodded slowly. My grandmother, Patricia's mother, had passed away when I was 16. She'd always been quietly supportive of my education. I remembered Patricia mentioning a small inheritance, but she'd always been very cagey about the details, saying it was tied up or for future family needs. Yeah, I said. She always said it was a small amount and that she was managing it. Why? Robin leaned forward. Well, sometimes these things aren't as straightforward as they seem, especially with family. My advice? You need to check the legal status of that inheritance fund. Like, really check it. Who's the actual trustee? Who has power of attorney? Sometimes people say one thing, but the legal documents say another. It was a long shot, but it felt right. Another avenue to explore, another piece of the puzzle. I made a note on a fresh page in my binder, Research Grandma's Inheritance Fund. The next morning, I made some calls. It took a few tries, navigating automated systems and explaining my relationship to the deceased. Finally, I got through to a paralegal at the law firm that had handled my grandmother's estate. I gave them my grandmother's full name, her date of death, and explained I was her granddaughter, trying to understand the details of the inheritance fund. The paralegal was helpful, if a little surprised by my query. She pulled up the file. Yes, Ms. Hamilton, your grandmother, bless her heart, was very specific. She set up a trust for her grandchildren's education and future. It was meant to be managed by a trustee until the beneficiaries reached a certain age, or for specific purposes. And who was the trustee? I asked, holding my breath. Initially it was your grandmother's brother, Miguel Steele, she said. My Uncle Miguel. I hadn't seen him in years. He and Patricia had a massive falling out years ago. Something about money, I vaguely recalled. But he stepped down due to personal reasons shortly after the will was executed. The power of attorney then transferred to the primary beneficiary, which, according to the documents, is you, Brinley Hamilton, upon reaching the age of 25. My hand froze, mid-air, as I was about to write something down. Wait. Me? I'm the controlling power of attorney. Yes, Ms. Hamilton. Since your 25th birthday, you've had full legal control over the fund. Did you not receive the notification letters? The notification letters. I remembered a stack of official-looking mail that had arrived around my 25th birthday, all addressed to me. Patricia had intercepted them, of course. Just boring legal stuff, honey, she'd said, waving them away. I'll handle it. My grandmother's inheritance fund. My money, again. And Patricia had been telling me for years that she was managing it, that it was for the family. The phone felt heavy in my hand. This wasn't just $11,000. This was a pattern. A deep, insidious pattern of financial control and deception. And I had just stumbled upon the biggest weapon of all. Finding out I was the legal power of attorney over my grandmother's inheritance fund, the one Patricia had always claimed she controlled, was like finding a hidden lever in a locked room. It didn't just explain the present, it cast a chilling light on the past. The paralegal had mentioned my Uncle Miguel Steele as the initial trustee. He was Patricia's younger brother, 40 years old, and someone I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. He'd been effectively excommunicated from the family after a huge fight with Patricia. Something about money, I vaguely remembered. Now, I needed to talk to him. It took some digging to find his number. He lived a couple of states away, having moved shortly after the family rift. I called, half expecting him not to answer or to hang up, but he picked up on the second ring. "Uncle Miguel?" "It's Brinley, Patricia's daughter." There was a long pause, then a cautious voice. "Brinley. Wow, it's been a long time. Everything all right?" "Not exactly," I said, and then, in a measured tone, I explained about my bank account, the missing $11,000, and my recent discovery about Grandma's inheritance fund. I mentioned the paralegal's name, the trust, and my unexpected role as power of attorney. He listened patiently, without interrupting. When I finished, there was another silence. Then a weary sigh. I knew it. I knew she'd do something like this eventually. He agreed to meet me. He was coming to the city for a business trip the following week, and we arranged to have coffee at a quiet spot near my apartment. When I saw him, he looked tired, but his eyes were sharp. He ordered a black coffee, no sugar, just like I remembered. "So," he began, stirring his coffee, "you found out about the trust. Your grandmother was a smart woman. She knew Patricia. That's why she put me as the initial trustee, and then you, when you came of age. She wanted that money to go to you, Brinley, for your education, your future, not for Patricia's whims." "Whims?" I prompted, my voice low. He met my gaze. "This has happened before, Brinley. You just never knew. After your grandmother died, there was a substantial amount in that fund. It was meant to be your college fund. Patricia got her hands on it. She told everyone it was tied up or needed for family emergencies. But it wasn't. She used it to bail out a failed business venture of hers, and then to fund Paris's private school tuition and her expensive hobbies. You ended up taking out student loans, didn't you?" My blood ran cold. He was right. I'd taken out loans for college, thinking my parents couldn't afford to help much. Patricia had always said, "We're doing our best, honey." College is expensive. The betrayal was deeper than I'd imagined. It wasn't just $11,000. It was my past, too. "I tried to stop her back then," Miguel continued, his voice heavy. "That's what our big fight was about. I told her what she was doing was wrong, that it was theft. She spun it, of course. Told your father I was trying to steal from the family, that I was jealous. She's a master manipulator. She financially cripples anyone who questions her authority, anyone who stands in her way. She makes them out to be the villain." "And Dad?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Did he know?" Miguel looked away, out the window. "Eric, your father, he knew enough. He saw what she was doing, but he never stood up to her. He just buried himself in work, pretended not to see. It was easier for him to be passive than to confront Patricia. He enabled her, Brinley. He always has. The image of my father, Eric, 60, always quiet, always retreating into his study or his work, suddenly made perfect, painful sense. He wasn't just distant, he was complicit through inaction. "So what do I do now?" I asked, my voice flat. "You freeze that account, Brinley, immediately. And you get a lawyer. Don't let her touch another cent of what's rightfully yours." I didn't need to be told twice. As soon as I got home, I called the law firm again. I explained the situation, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. I told them I wanted to exercise my full power of attorney, to review all transactions, and to freeze the account immediately pending further investigation. They confirmed they could do that and began the process. While I was on the phone with the law firm, I also initiated a formal fraud report with my bank regarding the $11,000 from my personal accounts. I had all the printouts, the dates, the names. It was a clear case of unauthorized access and theft. As the paralegal was confirming the freeze on the inheritance account, she mentioned something that made my blood run cold. "Oh, and Miss Hamilton," she said, almost as an afterthought, "we received a request to change the mailing address for the account statements to a new address in the city. It was submitted about 3 weeks ago, but we hadn't processed it yet, pending your confirmation as power of attorney." "What was the address?" I asked, my voice tight. She read it out. It was Paris and Emiliano's new address, the one Paris had bragged about, the one with the designer furniture. Less than a month ago. Patricia hadn't just stolen my savings. She'd been actively trying to gain control of my inheritance too, likely to fund Paris's new life even further. She was relentless. But now, I had the facts, and I had the power. The discovery that Patricia had tried to reroute my inheritance fund to Paris's address was the final piece of the puzzle. It wasn't just about the $11,000. It was about a lifetime of manipulation, a pattern of financial abuse that had gone unchecked. My anger hardened into something cold and precise. I wasn't interested in yelling. I was interested in consequences. The first thing I did was call my bank's fraud department again, this time with a more detailed report. I mentioned the cross-account activity, the transfers to Emiliano Wright's account, and the unauthorized use of my debit card. I also anonymously tipped them off about the attempted address change on the inheritance account, giving them enough information to connect the dots without directly implicating myself in the inheritance fund's legal details just yet. I wanted them to see a pattern of suspicious financial activity originating from Patricia's sphere. My apartment became a war room. I printed out every single transaction, every email, every text message that hinted at the truth. I bought more colored tabs, a new set of highlighters. Each piece of evidence was meticulously organized. Bank statements, credit card bills, screenshots of Paris's social media posts, even a photo of the eviction notice. I categorized them by type of expense, travel, furniture, dining, spa, and then by recipient. The folder for Paris and Emiliano's lavish lifestyle was thickest. Robin came over again, bringing takeout and a quiet sense of support. She watched me work, her expression grim. "You're really going for it, aren't you?" she said, gesturing to the stacks of paper. "They left me with $340 in my checking account while I was recovering from major surgery, Robin," I said, my voice flat. "They tried to steal my inheritance. This isn't just about money anymore. This is about proving that actions have consequences, even for family." I spent hours, days, meticulously going through everything. The dates, the amounts, the descriptions. I found a charge for a high-end espresso machine from a specialty store, dated a week after Paris had bragged about her new one. I found receipts for designer clothes, for expensive dinners, all tagged with my card number. The feedback loop from Paris and Patricia was almost comical in its obliviousness. Paris kept posting on Instagram, humble bragging about her new home essentials, including a photo of the sleek, silver espresso machine that I now knew was purchased with my money. Patricia, meanwhile, posted vague, martyr-like updates on Facebook about family sacrifices and doing what's best for your children, even when it's hard. It was all so transparent, So infuriating. I knew I couldn't just send them a letter from a lawyer. Patricia would spin it, gaslight, play the victim. Paris would throw a tantrum. My father, Eric, would retreat further. No, this needed to be delivered personally, with undeniable proof. I decided on a family lunch, a Sunday gathering, just like old times. I called Patricia. "Hey, Mom," I said, trying to sound like I was moving on, putting the past behind me. "I was thinking it's been a while since we all had a proper family meal. How about Sunday? My treat." She sounded delighted, completely oblivious. "Oh, Brintley, darling, that's a wonderful idea. Just what we need. I'll tell Paris and Emiliano. Your father will be thrilled." My father. Eric. He was 60 now, still distant, still avoiding conflict. I wondered if he'd finally look me in the eye when the truth came out. I kept working, refining my presentation. I didn't just want to show them the charges. I wanted to show them the pattern, the audacity, the sheer disregard for my well-being. The final credit card transaction I found was a deposit to Emiliano's crypto wallet, $700. It was dated just a few days before I found the eviction notice. My stomach dropped as I saw the memo line, typed in what must have been Patricia's hand. "Thanks from B." Thanks from B. As in Brinley. My name, used to cover their tracks, to make it look like I was willingly funding their lives. It was the ultimate insult, the final piece of proof that this wasn't just a mistake or a family emergency. It was a deliberate, calculated act of theft, shrouded in a web of lies, and it was time for them to face the music. Sunday arrived, bright and deceptively cheerful. I'd chosen a nice, quiet restaurant, the kind with linen tablecloths and hushed conversations. My treat, as I'd told Patricia. She'd loved that. When I walked in, they were already there, seated at a round table. Patricia, 54, looked radiant in a new dress, probably bought with some of my money. Eric, 60, my father, sat beside her, already looking a little bored, lost in his own thoughts. Across from them were Paris, 26, and Emiliano, 30. Paris was animated, laughing loudly at something Emiliano had said, her hand resting casually on his arm. They looked every inch the golden couple, basking in their newlywed glow. They greeted me warmly, almost too warmly. Patricia gave me a hug, a little too tight, a little too long. "Brinley, darling, so glad you could make it. It's been too long since we all had a proper family meal." "It has," I agreed, my voice calm, flat. I took the empty seat opposite Paris, placing my large tote bag carefully on the floor beside my chair. Inside, neatly stacked and tabbed, were months of my life, meticulously documented. We ordered drinks. Patricia launched into a story about a new neighbour. Paris interjected with anecdotes about her yoga classes. Emiliano chimed in with a charming, irrelevant comment about crypto trends. Eric nodded along, occasionally grunting. It was the usual family dynamic, a cacophony of self-absorbed chatter that I usually tuned out. Today, I let it wash over me, a strange calm settling over my nerves. When the waiter brought our appetizers, I took a deep breath. This was it. "So," I began, my voice cutting through Paris's story about a difficult student. Everyone looked at me, surprised by my sudden interjection. "I wanted to talk about something important." Patricia's smile faltered slightly. "Oh, Brinley, can it wait? We're having such a lovely time." "No, Mom, it can't." My gaze swept across their faces, lingering briefly on each one. Paris, still smiling, but a flicker of annoyance in her eyes. Emiliano, raising an eyebrow, sensing a shift. Eric, finally looking up from his plate, a faint crease forming between his brows. Patricia, her mouth tightening, her eyes narrowing. I reached down into my tote bag. The rustle of paper was the only sound in the sudden silence. I pulled out the first folder, a thick one, neatly tabbed. Then another, and another. I placed them on the table, sliding them towards each person. "These are for you," I said, my voice even, devoid of emotion. "Consider them a belated wedding gift, Paris. And a housewarming gift, Emiliano." Paris picked up the folder closest to her, her brow furrowing. "What is this, Brinley?" "Open it," I instructed. Slowly, hesitantly, they did. Patricia's hands trembled slightly as she opened hers. Eric just stared at the cover of his, which read, "Unauthorized Transactions, Brinley Hamilton." "Inside," I continued, my voice clear and steady, "you'll find a detailed accounting of how my $11,000 in life savings disappeared from my bank account over the past 3 months, while I was recovering from major surgery." I paused, letting that sink in. "You'll find the receipt for the VIP Couples Spa package at the Serenity Spa, dated 3 days after my operation, used by you, Paris, and Emiliano for your pre-honeymoon relaxation. You'll see the charges from Elite Furnishings for your new couch, Emiliano, the Bridal Bliss Boutique, Paris, the concert tickets, the high-end restaurant meals, the Uber rides to those hotels." I watched their faces. Paris's eyes widened, then darted to Emiliano, who had gone pale. Emiliano's charming facade cracked, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief and dawning horror. Eric slowly lifted his head, his gaze fixed on the papers, his face a mask of shame. "And the transfers to Emiliano's crypto wallet," I added, my voice cutting through the silence like a knife. $700, with the memo line, "Thanks from B." "A nice touch, Mom. Very subtle." Patricia's face was ashen, her lips pressed into a thin, white line. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. "This," I said, gesturing to the folders, "is where your lavish honeymoon came from. Your spa days, that flat-screen TV, that espresso machine you bragged about, Paris, that gift from B that wasn't a gift at all." The room was utterly silent. The gentle clinking of cutlery from other tables seemed impossibly loud. Paris finally found her voice, a strangled whisper. What is this? This isn't... Mom, what is she talking about?" Patricia couldn't speak. She just stared at me, her eyes wide, a desperate cornered look in them. "I've filed bank fraud claims," I stated, my voice unwavering. "I've frozen the inheritance account that Grandma left for me, the one you tried to reroute to Paris's address last month, Mom. I've submitted a police report for theft and unauthorized use of my financial accounts. The law will take it from here." I pushed my chair back, the scrape loud in the quiet restaurant. I stood up, looking down at them. Patricia finally managed to speak, her voice trembling, a raw, wounded sound. "Brinley," she choked out, tears welling in her eyes. "How could you do this to us?" I met her gaze, my own eyes cold and clear. "Exactly what you did to me." The silence at the restaurant, after I dropped those folders on the table, felt like a physical thing. It followed me out the door, into the street, and all the way back to my apartment. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew the bomb had landed. The fallout started almost immediately, a slow, agonizing drip of their desperation. Paris, true to form, went straight to social media. Within hours of the lunch, she posted a cryptic Instagram story, a black screen with white text that read, "Betrayal comes in suits, not just from enemies. Sometimes it's family." She didn't tag me, of course, but it was clearly aimed. It was classic Paris, dramatic, vague, and designed to elicit sympathy without ever taking responsibility. My phone buzzed with texts from mutual acquaintances asking if everything was okay, if Paris was having a meltdown. I ignored them all. Patricia, on the other hand, went for direct assault. My phone started ringing before I'd even finished putting away my binder. Call after call, text after text. I let them all go to voicemail. Her messages escalated from feigned concern to wounded indignation, then to outright rage. "Brinley, how could you do this? To your own mother. We were trying to help you." "This is a misunderstanding, honey. You're overreacting. You always do." "You're destroying this family. Do you know what you've done?" "Call me back, Brinley. We need to talk this through. Don't be so dramatic." It was the same old song and dance, the gaslighting, the victim blaming, but this time it didn't touch me. I felt nothing but a cool detachment. I'd spent months meticulously documenting their lies. Her words were just noise. My father, Eric, usually the master of avoidance, sent me a single, short email 2 days later. It read, "Brinley, I'm so sorry. I should have done more. Please, can we talk?" It was the most direct apology I'd ever received from him, but it was too little, too late. Years of passive enabling, years of burying his head in the sand while Patricia ran roughshod over everyone, especially me. I didn't reply. What was there to talk about? The damage was done, and he had stood by and watched it happen. Emiliano, surprisingly, tried a different tactic. He messaged me on LinkedIn, of all places. "Brinley, I'm so sorry about all of this. Paris can be a lot. She made a lot of decisions without consulting me. I really had no idea where the money was coming from. Can we talk? I want to make this right." I almost laughed. The charming public facade, crumbling under pressure, blaming Paris, of course. He'd benefited from every single stolen dollar, from the honeymoon to the crypto deposit. I blocked him without a reply. Robin called me a few times a day, checking in. "How are you holding up?" she'd ask. "Fine," I'd say. "Just quiet. It's weird, Robin. I thought I'd feel angry or sad, but I just feel empty and determined." "That's good," she'd replied. "Keep that distance. Don't let them pull you back in. They'll try every trick in the book to manipulate you into dropping this." And they did. The calls, the texts, the passive-aggressive social media posts. But I held firm. My focus was on the legal process. A week after the Sunday lunch, the first official communications started rolling in. I received a letter from my bank's fraud department confirming they were investigating the unauthorized transactions and had frozen the accounts involved. They requested an interview to go over my detailed report. I scheduled it immediately. Then came the bigger news. My Uncle Miguel called me. "Brinley," he said, his voice grim. "My lawyer just heard through the grapevine. Patricia is being audited. A full financial audit. Apparently, the bank fraud report you filed triggered some flags, and they're looking into several large, unexplained transfers and cash withdrawals over the past year. A full audit. That was more than I'd hoped for. It meant the authorities weren't just looking at my $11,000, but at Patricia's entire financial history. The web of lies was starting to unravel for good. The biggest twist, though, came in the mail a few days later. A crisp, official-looking letter from a major credit card company. It was addressed to me. I opened it, confused. It was a rejection letter for a new credit card application. My heart hammered. I hadn't applied for any new credit cards. I scanned the details. The application had been submitted online, using my name, my date of birth, and my social security number. The mailing address provided for the new card. Paris and Emiliano's new apartment. The same address Patricia had tried to reroute my inheritance statements to. The reason for the rejection was clear. Credit frozen due to recent fraud alert. My own vigilance, my own actions, had inadvertently protected me from yet another attempt at financial abuse. Paris, desperate for funds, had tried to open a credit card in my name, likely with Patricia's knowledge or encouragement. But my credit was frozen, thanks to the fraud report I'd filed. They were truly desperate. And they were still trying to use me. But their well had run dry. The letter about Paris trying to open a credit card in my name and getting declined because my credit was frozen was the final, pathetic act of their desperation. It didn't make me angry. It just solidified my resolve. They weren't just thieves. They were relentless, entitled, and utterly incapable of taking responsibility. A few days later, a group message popped up on my phone. It was from Patricia, but Paris and Eric were also included. Emiliano was conspicuously absent. The message read, "Brinley, we are so sorry. We truly are. This has been a terrible misunderstanding. We know we made mistakes. We'll pay you back every single dollar, we promise. Just please unfreeze the inheritance account. We need access to it. We're a family. We can work this out." It was a joint plea, a coordinated effort. The "we're sorry" felt hollow, a tactic to get what they wanted. They weren't sorry for what they did. They were sorry they got caught and sorry for the consequences. And they still thought they could manipulate me with the idea of family. I didn't reply. Not for a day. Not for 2 days. I let their message sit there, unread, a testament to their dwindling power. I went about my life. I paid my rent, now that my finances were back in order. I went to physical therapy. I worked. The quiet in my apartment, once a sign of my isolation, now felt like a sanctuary. On the 3rd day, I drafted my reply. I typed it slowly, carefully, every word chosen with precision. I didn't use any emotional language. No anger, no accusations, just facts. "To Patricia, Paris, and Eric," I wrote. "Your message has been received. There is no misunderstanding. The facts are clear, and they are now in the hands of the authorities. The bank fraud claims and police report will proceed as filed. The inheritance account will remain frozen and under my legal control. I am formally withdrawing from this family. Expect full legal proceedings to follow regarding the recovery of the stolen funds and any further unauthorized financial activity. Do not contact me again." I hit send. There was no hesitation, no second thoughts, just a quiet click. My phone didn't ring after that. The group chat remained silent. The constant barrage of calls and texts from Patricia stopped. Paris's Instagram went private. The silence was absolute. I walked through my apartment, a sense of lightness settling over me. The binder, once a symbol of my pain and anger, now sat neatly on my shelf, a testament to my meticulousness, my resolve. It wasn't a burden anymore. It was proof. I thought about the years of Patricia's manipulation, Paris's entitlement, Eric's enabling, the way they had always treated me as an afterthought, as a resource to be exploited. I thought about the $11,000 and the inheritance fund and the college loans I'd taken out because my own mother had stolen my future. But I wasn't thinking about it with rage or bitterness. I was thinking about it with a profound sense of closure. I wasn't lonely. I was free. Free from the constant anxiety of their demands. Free from the insidious gaslighting. Free from the expectation that I would always be the one to give, to forgive, to forget. People always say, revenge leaves you empty. They've never been this full of proof. The smell of antiseptic still clung to my clothes, even after a hot shower. For 6 months, that was my life. The sterile scent of the oncology ward, the rhythmic drip of the IV pole, the quiet, desperate hope clinging to every breath. I'm Iris, 31 years old, and during that time, every single penny I'd ever saved, every dream I'd ever whispered to myself about a future, had been funneled into keeping my mother, Cora, alive. It wasn't a choice, not really. It was an obligation, a silent, crushing weight I'd carried since I was a kid. When Mom, who was 56, got her cancer diagnosis, it felt like the world had tilted. The doctors laid out the treatment plan, the astronomical costs, and I didn't hesitate. My older sister, Autumn, 28, had just started some vague online business venture and claimed she was cash-strapped. Dad had passed away years ago, leaving Mom with a small pension and a house that needed constant repairs. So, it fell to me. I drained my savings account until it was a ghost of its former self. I sold my beat-up Civic, the one I'd driven since high school, for a fraction of what it was worth, just to cover another round of chemo. I started taking the bus, adding an hour to my commute each way, but I didn't care. My social life evaporated. Friends stopped calling when I consistently turned down invitations, too exhausted or too broke to join them. My evenings were spent researching experimental treatments, poring over medical bills, or simply sitting by Mom's bedside, holding her hand while she slept, the faint scent of sickness in the air. I didn't want praise. I didn't want a medal or a pat on the back. I just wanted her to see me, to truly see me, to acknowledge the sacrifice, not with words of gratitude, but with a look, a touch, a moment of genuine connection that wasn't about what I could do for her. I wanted her to know I was there, not just as a financial resource, but as her daughter, hurting with her, fighting for her. The final chemo session had been a week ago. Mom was home now, weak but recovering. The house, usually a whirlwind of Autumn's friends or Mom's endless stream of complaints, had been quiet. A fragile peace had settled. I'd spent the morning running errands, stocking the fridge with her favorite foods, picking up her prescriptions. I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and relief, a quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, now that the crisis was over, things could be different. Maybe we could actually be a family. I let myself in, the front door creaking softly. The house was silent, save for a low hum from the kitchen. I kicked off my shoes, setting my keys on the small table by the door. As I started up the stairs, I heard voices from the living room. Mom and Autumn. They were laughing. A real, unrestrained laugh from Mom, the kind I hadn't heard in months, maybe years. A pang of something, not quite jealousy, but a deep, familiar ache twisted in my gut. I paused on the third step, my hand on the banisters. "Oh, Autumn, you should have seen her face," Mom said, her voice laced with amusement. "She actually thought I'd be grateful." Autumn giggled. "Well, she did pay for everything, Mom. You can't deny that." "Yes, well," Mom scoffed, a dismissive wave in her tone. "She's finally good for something. Money." The words hit me like a physical blow. The air left my lungs. My hand tightened on the banister, my knuckles white. I stood there, frozen, listening to their laughter echo through the quiet house. It wasn't a joke. It was casual, dismissive, utterly devoid of warmth. It was the truth, laid bare. I was a means to an end, a wallet, a resource, nothing more. Slowly, silently, I stepped back down the stairs. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. My hand reached for the keys I'd just put down. My fingers closed around the cold metal. I didn't make a sound. I just turned, my back to the laughter, and walked out the front door. The cold metal of the keys felt heavy in my palm as I walked out, the laughter still echoing in my ears. I didn't slam the door. I didn't even close it properly. I just let it swing shut behind me, a quiet, definitive click marking the end of something. My heart was a raw, exposed nerve. All those months, all that sacrifice, all that desperate hope for a shred of genuine affection reduced to a punchline. She's finally good for something. Money. I didn't have a car anymore, but I had my feet. I walked until my legs ached, until the familiar streets blurred into an indistinguishable maze. I called a rideshare, numbly giving the driver an address to a cheap motel on the outskirts of town. I couldn't go back to that house. Not ever. The next few days were a blur of frantic action fueled by a cold, hard resolve. I packed a single suitcase with essentials, the rest of my belongings feeling like anchors to a past I needed to sever. I booked a bus ticket to a small town 4 hours north, a place I'd only ever seen on a map, chosen for its distance and its anonymity. I didn't tell anyone. Not my mother, not Autumn, not even the few friends I still occasionally spoke to. I just left. The first few weeks in Willow Creek were a desolate landscape of loneliness. I found a tiny, run-down apartment above a bakery, the smell of yeast and sugar, a constant, cloying presence. I got a job waiting tables at a diner, the tips barely covering rent and food. Every night, I'd lie awake, the silence of the new town amplifying the screams in my head. The betrayal was a festering wound, refusing to heal. One evening, staring at the blank pages of a cheap spiral notebook I'd bought, I picked up a pen. I didn't know what to write, but the urge to pour out the poison inside me was overwhelming. The words came haltingly at first, then in a torrent. The exhaustion, the hope, the overheard laughter, the crushing realization. It was ugly, raw, and utterly necessary. Journaling became my lifeline, a silent confidant for the pain I couldn't share. It was in one of those late-night journaling sessions, scrolling aimlessly online, that I stumbled upon an online forum for adult children of narcissists. The stories resonated with a chilling familiarity, the emotional manipulation, the gaslighting, the constant need to earn love that was never freely given. It was like reading my own life, refracted through 1,000 different lenses. The forum linked to local support groups, and a few weeks later, my anxiety warring with a desperate need for connection, I found myself walking into a small community centre for a meeting. That's where I met Robin. She was 34, with kind eyes and a laugh that seemed to bubble up from somewhere deep inside her. Her story was different from mine in its specifics, but the underlying current of emotional exploitation by a parent was painfully similar. She spoke about feeling like a constant emotional ATM, drained and discarded. But then she talked about healing, about finding her voice, and about her dream of building a safe space for others who had walked similar paths. She spoke of a retreat, a place of sanctuary. Her words were a balm and a spark. A tiny flicker of an idea began to take root in the barren landscape of my despair. Months turned into nearly a year. I was 32 now, still working at the diner, still journaling, still attending the group. I hadn't heard a word from my family, not a call, not a text, not an email. It confirmed everything I needed to know. I was truly invisible to them unless I was serving a purpose. Then, one afternoon, my phone rang. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something compelled me. Hello? Iris? Is that really you? It was Autumn. Her voice, usually so confident and bright, sounded thin, almost whiny. I didn't say anything. I just listened, my heart pounding a furious rhythm against my ribs. Look, I know you're probably mad, but things are really bad here. Mom's been asking where you are. She's really worried. A bitter laugh almost escaped me. Worried? About her money supply, maybe. Anyway, Autumn continued, oblivious to my silence. I'm totally stranded. My car broke down and I'm out of cash. Hey, can you Venmo me gas money? Just $20? I'll pay you back, I swear. Gas money. After everything. After I'd sold my car, drained my life savings, and vanished into thin air, she was calling me for $20 for gas. It wasn't anger that flooded me. It was a cold, quiet fury that settled deep in my bones. I didn't say a word. I just slowly, deliberately pressed the end call button. I walked over to my small, rickety desk, pulled out my journal, and flipped to a fresh page. My hand was steady as I wrote, the words forming a silent vow. Let's see what I can build from the ashes they made of me. That phone call from Autumn, asking for gas money, had been the final shard of ice in my heart. It solidified everything. They hadn't cared where I was, what I was doing, or if I was even alive. They just cared about what they could extract. But that call also clarified something else, the path forward. My journal entry wasn't just a lament, it was a blueprint. The next few months, I poured every ounce of my energy into that blueprint. Robin and I spent hours, days, weeks, huddled over coffee-stained napkins, and later, proper spreadsheets. We brainstormed, sketched, and meticulously planned. Robin, with her boundless empathy and practical approach, was the perfect counterpoint to my simmering resolve. She envisioned a sanctuary. I envisioned a crucible. Together, we found a balance. We called it Wisteria Wells. The name came to me one night, thinking of the climbing vine that thrives even in harsh conditions, its roots deep, its flowers beautiful but resilient. Our retreat would be for women who had experienced emotional abuse, financial trauma, or toxic family dynamics. It wouldn't be a luxury spa. It would be a place for raw, honest healing where women could rebuild themselves from the ground up, just like I was trying to do. I was 32, and Robin was 34. We pooled our meager resources. Robin had some savings from a previous job, and I still had a small amount left from the sale of my car after the initial cancer treatments, along with what I'd managed to save from the diner. It wasn't much, but it was a start. We scoured real estate listings, looking for cheap land, something remote but accessible. We found it, a neglected, overgrown plot about an hour outside Willow Creek, nestled against a small, clear stream. It was cheap because it was undeveloped, just raw land. We started small. We bought a few used but sturdy, minimalist trailers. The idea was to create individual spaces that offered dignity and privacy, not dorm-style bunks. We spent weekends clearing brush, hauling lumber, and painting. We learned how to lay simple foundations, how to connect basic plumbing. It was back-breaking work, but every nail hammered, every bush cleared, felt like an act of defiance. It was a physical manifestation of my refusal to be broken. Sometimes, as I worked, a memory would surface, unbidden. A flashback to my teenage years, maybe 15 or 16, still desperate for my mother's approval. Autumn, who would have been 12 or 13 then, was always Mom's favourite. She was charismatic, charming, and knew exactly how to play Mom. I remember one afternoon, sitting in the living room, supposedly doing homework, but really just listening. Mom was coaching Autumn, who was complaining about Dad not giving her enough allowance for a new pair of shoes. No, Autumn, Mom had said, her voice low and conspiratorial. You don't just ask. You make him feel like it's his idea. You tell him how much you admire his hard work, how you just wish you could be as independent as him, but these shoes are just so important for that school project. You know, the one where you need to look presentable? Mom had winked. You twist words to get more out of Dad. Make him think he's helping you achieve your dreams, not just buying you something. Autumn had nodded, absorbing every word, a sly smile already forming on her face. I had watched, a knot forming in my stomach. I saw the manipulation, even then, but I didn't have the words for it. I just knew it felt wrong. And I knew that kind of coaching was never offered to me. Back in the present, the memory fueled my resolve. Wisteria Wells wouldn't be a place for that kind of manipulation. It would be a place for truth. As Wisteria Wells slowly took shape, we realized we needed professional help. We needed a therapist, someone experienced in trauma and family dynamics. Robin, ever the networker, found Selena Newton. Selena was 43, with a calm demeanor and eyes that seemed to see right through you. She had a long, impressive resume and a reputation for being incredibly insightful. We interviewed her, and she immediately understood our vision. She was exactly what we needed. During the onboarding process, Selena asked for emergency contact information. I hesitated, then reluctantly wrote down Cora's name and phone number. It was a formality, a legal requirement. I never expected her to use it or even look at it closely. A few days later, Selena called me. "Iris," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "I was just reviewing your emergency contact forms. Your mother's name is Cora Ellis?" My stomach dropped. "Yes," I said, my voice tight. "Why?" "No reason," Selena replied, a beat too long before she continued. "Just a familiar name. I'm sure it's nothing. Just checking details." She didn't disclose why the name was familiar, but a flicker of something, a knowing look I couldn't quite decipher, passed through her eyes before she quickly changed the subject. I brushed it off, attributing it to my own paranoia. But the seed of unease was planted. 3 years had passed since I'd left home. 3 years since I'd heard Autumn's voice on the phone, asking for gas money. 3 years since I'd last seen my mother. I was now 35, and Robin was 37. Wisteria Wells, once just a rough blueprint and a few minimalist trailers, had blossomed. It wasn't just a retreat anymore. It was a destination. We had expanded, adding more small, self-contained units, a communal kitchen, and a dedicated therapy space. The stream that ran through the property had been cleared, and we'd built a small meditation deck overlooking it. Women came from all over the country, drawn by word of mouth and, more recently, by a feature in a major online publication. A BuzzFeed listicle, of all things, had named Wisteria Wells one of the top 10 healing retreats for women. Our little sanctuary was no longer a secret. I had learned to navigate the world under a different name, at least professionally. When Wisteria Wells started gaining traction, Robin and I decided it was safer for me to use a pseudonym. I chose I.D. Romero. It was distinct enough from Iris Ellis to avoid immediate recognition, but still felt like a part of me. It was a shield, a necessary layer of protection against a past I was still trying to outrun. My personal life was still quiet, focused entirely on the retreat and the women who came to us. Selena Newton, our lead therapist, had become an invaluable part of the team. She was 46 now, her calm demeanor a steady anchor for everyone. That brief, unsettling moment when she'd recognized Cora's name had faded into the background, replaced by the daily demands of running the retreat. I'd convinced myself it was just a coincidence, a common name. Life at Wisteria Wells was demanding but fulfilling. I felt a sense of purpose I'd never known. Helping these women, seeing them shed layers of trauma and begin to heal, was a powerful antidote to my own lingering pain. The quiet fury that had fueled me in the beginning had softened, replaced by a quiet strength. But the desire for justice, for some form of cosmic rebalancing, still hummed beneath the surface. Then, one Tuesday morning, it started. An email. The subject line was simply, Iris? The sender was Autumn Ellis. My stomach clenched. I hadn't heard from her in 3 years. I almost deleted it, but a morbid curiosity, a flicker of the old wound, made me click. The email was rambling, disjointed, filled with typos. It spoke of betrayal, of losing everything. Terry did something horrible, she wrote. He just took off. With everything. I don't have anywhere to go, Iris. Mom's. She's not helping. She says I made my bet. Please, Iris. I don't know who else to turn to. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of the past, just a desperate plea for help, framed entirely around her own immediate crisis. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Terry Jordan, Autumn's ex-boyfriend and business partner. I vaguely remembered him from years ago, a slick-haired guy who always seemed to be chasing the next get-rich-quick scheme. So, his scheme had finally imploded, taking Autumn with it. Poetic justice, perhaps, but not the kind I had envisioned. A few hours later, my phone buzzed with a voicemail notification. It was Autumn again. Her voice was raw, choked with tears. Iris, please pick up. I'm really in trouble. I'm literally on the street. I have nowhere to go. Terry, he left me with nothing. I just need a place to stay, just for a little while. I swear I've changed. I swear I understand now. Please, Iris. Please. The desperation in her voice was undeniable. It was a stark contrast to the entitled, dismissive tone I remembered. This wasn't the charismatic, favoured daughter. This was a broken woman. A part of me, the old, wounded part, felt a perverse satisfaction, but another part, the part that had built Wisteria Wells, felt a flicker of something else, a cold, calculating thought. I didn't reply to the email. I didn't return the call. I just forwarded the voicemail to Robin. She called me immediately. "Iris," she said, her voice soft. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I replied, my voice flat. "Listen to the voicemail, and then check our applications." There was a pause. "Why?" "Just do it." A few minutes later, Robin called back, her voice a mix of shock and disbelief. "Iris, you're not going to believe this. I just pulled a new application. It came in this morning. Name, Autumn Johnson. Address, listed as transient. Reason for seeking retreat, emotional and financial upheaval, betrayal by loved ones. Age, 32. Autumn, my sister, applying for a spot at Wisteria Wells, under a different last name, but the age, the story, it all matched. She had no idea who owned this place, no idea who I.D. Romero was. A slow, chilling smile spread across my face. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humour, or perhaps a sense of karma. "Autumn Johnson," Robin repeated, still sounding a little stunned. "Are you really going to let her come?" I looked out the window of my office, past the newly planted wisteria vines climbing the trellis, towards the quiet individual units nestled among the trees. She applied. She meets the criteria. Emotional and financial upheaval? Check. Betrayal by loved ones? Double check. My voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "We don't discriminate based on past familial relations, do we?" Robin sighed, a long, weary sound. "No, we don't." "But this is different, Iris. This is your family, the ones who broke you." "Precisely," I said, turning back to her. "And now she's broken. It's an opportunity." Robin looked at me, her kind eyes searching mine. "An opportunity for what, Iris? Healing? Or—" She didn't finish the sentence, but the unspoken word hung in the air between us. Revenge. "For her to face herself," I said carefully. "For her to experience what it's like to be truly vulnerable, truly discarded. Just like she and Mom made me feel." I saw the flicker of concern in Robin's eyes, but I pushed past it. "We'll accept her for a short residency. 2 weeks, no special treatment. She'll be just another guest." Robin hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Okay, but you have to promise me you'll be careful. This isn't just about her. It's about you, too. Don't let her pull you back into that toxic dynamic." "I won't," I promised, though a part of me knew this was exactly about pulling her into a dynamic she couldn't escape. My transformation was complete. I was no longer the desperate, invisible daughter. I was I.D. Romero, co-founder of Wisteria Wells. The day Autumn was scheduled to arrive, I felt a strange mix of anticipation and dread. It had been 3 years since I'd last seen her, 3 years since I'd been Iris Ellis. I wondered if she would recognize me. I'd changed. My hair was shorter, styled differently. My body was leaner, stronger from the physical work of building Wisteria Wells. My eyes, I knew, held a different kind of fire now. A beat-up sedan pulled up the gravel driveway. A woman emerged, looking thin and nervous, her shoulders hunched. Her clothes were rumpled, her usually vibrant hair dull and unkempt. It was Autumn. My sister, Autumn, the favoured one, the charismatic one, now looked like a ghost of her former self. She was 32, but she looked older, worn down by something I could only imagine. She glanced around, her eyes sweeping over the peaceful grounds, the wisteria-covered units, the quiet stream. Her gaze passed right over me as I stood by the main office, observing. There was no flicker of recognition. None. My transformation was complete. A cold satisfaction settled in my chest. Robin, ever the welcoming face, stepped forward to greet her. Autumn Johnson, welcome to Wisteria Wells. I'm Robin, the co-founder. Autumn managed a weak smile. Hi, thanks for having me. This place is nice. Her voice was softer than I remembered, stripped of its usual bravado. I kept my distance during her check-in, observing from the periphery. I didn't participate directly in the intake process or the initial orientation. My role as ID. Romero was usually more behind the scenes, managing operations and finances, leaving the direct therapeutic work to Selena and the other facilitators. This allowed me to maintain a neutral, almost invisible presence. For the first few days, I was a phantom. I saw Autumn at mealtimes, in the communal kitchen, during the quiet hours when guests were encouraged to reflect. She was quiet, withdrawn. She mostly kept to herself, occasionally exchanging polite, hesitant words with other guests. She didn't seem to notice me, or if she did, she simply saw another staff member. Then came the first group circle she attended. Selena led it, her voice calm and guiding. The women shared their stories, their pain, their struggles with betrayal and manipulation. Autumn, hesitant at first, eventually spoke. She recounted a version of her downfall, focusing on Terry's betrayal, his financial schemes, how he had left her with nothing. She talked about feeling abandoned, about the women I loved, who had turned their backs on her when she needed them most. She omitted me entirely. Not a word about her older sister, who had paid for their mother's cancer treatment, who had disappeared without a trace. Not a single acknowledgement of my existence in her narrative of victimhood. Hearing her sob about betrayal from women I loved sent a spiral of anticipation and fury through me. It was so perfectly Autumn. To twist the narrative, to cast herself as the ultimate victim, even now. The cold satisfaction I'd felt earlier hardened into something sharper, more precise. That evening, Robin found me in my office, staring out at the darkening sky. "You okay?" she asked, her voice gentle. "She didn't mention me," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Not once. It's like I never existed." Robin sat beside me, placing a hand on my arm. "That's how they operate, Iris?" "They rewrite history to suit their narrative." I turned to her, my eyes blazing with a renewed resolve. "She's going to hear the truth. She's going to hear my truth." Robin hesitated, her gaze searching mine. "You going in tomorrow's circle?" "Yes," I said, the word a quiet promise. Now they can both feel it. The air in the group circle room felt thick, heavy with unspoken emotions. Selena, 46, sat cross-legged on a cushion, her presence calm and grounding. Around her, a dozen women sat in a loose circle, some with tear-streaked faces, others with a quiet intensity in their eyes. Autumn was there, too, looking smaller than usual, her shoulders still hunched. She was 32. Selena began the session, her voice a soothing balm. "Today, we're going to talk about the narratives we create for ourselves, how we tell our stories, and what parts we choose to include or omit." Autumn, surprisingly, was one of the first to speak. She launched into a more polished version of the story she'd shared with Robin and me. Her voice trembled as she spoke of Terry, her ex-boyfriend and business partner, absconding with their joint funds, leaving her destitute. She painted a vivid picture of betrayal, of being left homeless, of the crushing weight of starting over. She even managed to weave in a subtle jab at her mother, Cora, for not being supportive. "My own mother," she said, her voice cracking, "told me I made my bed and had to lie in it. It's like everyone I thought I could count on just disappeared when things got hard." She paused, looking around the circle, her eyes glistening with what looked like genuine pain. The other women offered murmurs of sympathy, some nodding in understanding. It was a masterclass in manipulation, even now, even broken. She spun a tale of pure victimhood, carefully omitting any mention of her own choices, her own entitlement, or the sister who had literally paid for their mother's life. My heart hammered against my ribs, a drumbeat of anticipation. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for, planning for 3 long years. I had walked into the room silently, mid-session, just as Autumn was finishing her carefully curated narrative. My presence hadn't been noticed by most, their attention fixed on Autumn. Autumn lifted her head, her gaze sweeping across the room, and then she saw me. Her eyes, wide and red-rimmed, fixed on mine. The colour drained from her face. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. "Iris?" The word was a bare whisper, barely audible above the quiet hum of the room. It was the first time she had spoken my name in 3 years, the first time she had acknowledged my existence. I didn't flinch. I stood tall, my arms crossed, my gaze unwavering. Yes. My voice was calm, steady, betraying none of the storm raging inside me. A silence, thick and heavy, descended upon the room. It felt like the entire world had paused, the air suddenly too thin to breathe. Every eye in the circle, including Selena's, was now on us. The camera, if there had been one, would have panned slowly from Autumn's shocked, pale face to my own, unreadable expression. "I built this," I said, my voice cutting through the silence, clear and resonant. I gestured around the room, to the walls, the floor, the very space they were sitting in. Every nail, every board, every wisteria vine outside. It was built from the ashes of everything you and Mom took from me. Autumn flinched, her eyes darting around the room as if looking for an escape. "You came here looking for healing," I continued, my voice gaining a quiet power. "For understanding, for a safe space. This is a safe space, but it's not a place for enablers or for those who refuse to see their own part in their pain." I took a step forward, my gaze locking with hers. "And no, Autumn, I don't fund abusers anymore." The words hung in the air, sharp and final. Autumn's face crumpled. She pushed herself up from her cushion, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Without another word, she bolted. She ran from the room, her footsteps echoing down the hall, then fading as she burst out the front door of the main building. Selena watched her go, then turned to me, her expression unreadable. The other women in the circle sat in stunned silence, some looking at me with shock, others with a dawning understanding. That night, long after the group session had ended and the retreat had settled into its usual quiet hum, a furious pounding erupted on the door of my small, personal unit. It was relentless, desperate. Iris! Autumn's voice, hoarse and raw, screamed from the other side. Open this door! You don't understand what happened to me! You don't understand anything! The pounding on my door was relentless, each thud echoing the frantic beat of my own heart. Autumn's screams were raw, desperate, stripped of any pretense. You don't understand what happened to me! You don't understand anything! I took a deep breath, steeling myself. This was it. The confrontation I'd avoided for 3 years, the one I had, in a twisted way, engineered. I walked to the door and slowly, deliberately, unlocked it. Autumn stood there, her face blotchy and tear-streaked, her eyes wild. She looked utterly devastated. She was still 32, but the years of hard living, of whatever Terry had put her through, had carved lines of exhaustion around her eyes. "How could you?" she choked out, pushing past me into the small living area of my unit. "How could you do this to me? After everything?" "After everything?" I repeated, my voice dangerously calm. "You want to talk about everything, Autumn. Let's talk about everything. Let's talk about how I drained my life savings, sold my car, and isolated myself for 6 months to pay for Mom's cancer treatment. Let's talk about how I just wanted a shred of connection, a moment of real gratitude, and what I got instead was Mom laughing, saying I was finally good for something. Money! Autumn flinched, her eyes wide. You heard that? Every word, I said, the memory still a fresh wound. And then I walked out, and you never called, not once in 3 years, not to ask if I was okay, not to wonder where I went, until you needed something, until you needed gas money, and then, conveniently, a place to stay when your own schemes blew up in your face. It wasn't like that, she cried, collapsing onto my small sofa, burying her face in her hands. You just left. Mom told everyone you were dangerous, mentally unstable. She said you had a breakdown and just vanished. She said you were a liability. The words hit me like a fresh wave of nausea. Dangerous. Mentally unstable. A liability. Cora, my mother, had rewritten history, twisting my desperate departure into a narrative that absolved her and Autumn of any responsibility. It was classic Cora. She rewrote the story, I said, my voice cold. Of course she did. Just like she coached you on how to twist words to get more out of Dad. Remember that, Autumn? How to manipulate him into buying you those shoes. You were a quick study. Autumn lifted her head, her eyes red-rimmed. She made me. She dangled love like strings. If I didn't do what she wanted, if I didn't say what she wanted, she'd freeze me out. You don't know what it was like, Iris. You were always the strong one. She never had to work on you like that. Oh, she worked on me, I retorted, a bitter laugh escaping me. She just used a different tactic. Guilt, obligation, the silent expectation that I would always be there to clean up her messes, to pay her bills, to be her emotional placeholder, while you, the favored one, got to be the charming, manipulative princess. She didn't have to work on me like that because I was already programmed to try and earn her love, no matter the cost. Autumn stared at me, her face a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension. I didn't know, she whispered. I swear I thought you just left because you were angry, not because she said that. It doesn't matter what you thought, I said, my voice firm. What matters is what you did, or didn't do. You enabled her. You benefited from her manipulation. You turned a blind eye to my suffering, just like she did. Just then, a soft knock came at the door. Selena stood there, her gaze sweeping over the tense scene. She looked at Autumn, then at me, her expression unreadable. "Iris," she said, her voice calm. "Can I speak with you for a moment, privately?" I nodded, stepping outside and closing the door behind me, leaving Autumn alone with her shattered illusions. "I think it's time you knew," Selena said, her voice low, almost a whisper. "When you told me your mother's name was Cora Ellis, I recognized it. Not from you. From my own past." My heart pounded. "What are you talking about?" "Cora Ellis," Selena continued, her eyes distant, "destroyed another young woman decades ago. My own sister, Lily. Lily was Cora's best friend in high school. Cora convinced her to invest all her inheritance, every penny, into a sure thing business venture. It was a scam. Lily lost everything, her savings, her home, her trust. It broke her. She never recovered. Cora just moved on without a backward glance, blaming Lily for being too naive. The revelation hit me like a tidal wave. It wasn't just me. It wasn't just my father or Autumn. It was a pattern, decades of manipulation, of emotional and financial exploitation, leaving a trail of broken lives in her wake. My mother wasn't just a flawed parent. She was a predator. I looked back at my unit, where Autumn sat, reeling from her own shattered narrative. The anger, the fury, the desire for revenge, it all coalesced into a cold, hard certainty. I walked back inside. Autumn looked up, her face still streaked with tears. "Iris, please, I'm so sorry. I really am. I need help. I have nowhere to go." I looked at her, truly looked at her. Her pain was real. Her desperation was palpable. But it didn't undo mine. It didn't erase the years of being invisible, of being used. "Your pain doesn't undo mine," I said, my voice devoid of warmth. "It doesn't erase the cost. You made your hell, Autumn. Now you live in it." Autumn stared at me, her mouth agape. The realization that I wasn't going to save her, that this wasn't a rescue mission, dawned on her face. Her shoulders slumped. "Get out," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "Pack your things. Leave Wisteria Wells. Now." She didn't argue. She didn't cry anymore. She just slowly, numbly, got up and walked out. No goodbye. The silence after Autumn left was profound. Not the thick, suffocating silence of betrayal, but a quiet, almost peaceful emptiness. She had packed her meager belongings and vanished as quickly as she'd appeared, leaving no trace but the faint scent of desperation in the air. Weeks turned into a few months. The wisteria vines outside my office were in full bloom, their fragrant purple clusters a testament to resilience. Wisteria Wells continued to thrive. New guests arrived, bringing their own stories of brokenness and hope. I was still Iris, 35 years old, but the woman who sat in the final group circle with the current cohort of guests felt different. My voice, once tight with suppressed emotion, was now steadier, clearer. The revenge I had craved, the precision I had orchestrated, had played out. Autumn had faced the consequences of her choices, stripped bare and exposed. But the satisfaction wasn't the fiery explosion I had anticipated. It was something quieter, more subtle. One afternoon, Selena, 46, found me in the communal kitchen, making tea. She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes kind, understanding. "I have something for you," she said, holding out a thick, aged envelope. I took it, my brow furrowed. The paper was yellowed, the handwriting unfamiliar, yet somehow deeply familiar at the same time. It was my father's handwriting. He had died when I was in my early 20s, long before Mom's cancer diagnosis, long before I drained my savings. "Your mother gave it to me years ago," Selina explained gently. "When I first started working here, and I asked about your emergency contacts, she said it was an old letter from your father, something she'd found after he passed. She told me it was too emotional for you, that you were too sensitive, and it would upset your delicate balance. She asked me to hold on to it just in case, but never to give it to you unless she said so. I kept it, tucked away. After what I learned about her, about Lily, I knew it was another one of her manipulations. She didn't want you to have it." My hands trembled as I carefully opened the envelope. The paper crackled. My father's familiar, slightly shaky script filled the page. "My dearest Iris, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I know things are hard, and they'll probably get harder. Your mother, she has a way of making people feel like they owe her, like they're never quite enough. Don't let her confuse your giving heart for weakness. You were always the strongest one, Iris, the one who saw things clearly, who felt things deeply. Don't ever lose that. Don't let anyone dim your light. Keep giving, but know when to protect yourself. You deserve a life full of real love, not just obligation. I love you, my brave girl. Dad." Tears welled in my eyes, blurring the words. Not tears of sadness, but of a profound, aching recognition. He had seen it. He had known. All those years, I had thought I was alone in seeing the cracks in our family's facade. But Dad, in his quiet way, had seen it too. And he had tried to warn me. Cora had kept this from me, another thread in her web of control. Later that day, I walked down to the small garden we'd cultivated near the stream. I carried a small metal box. Inside were old letters from my past, a few from Mom, filled with passive-aggressive remarks and thinly veiled demands, a couple from Autumn, full of self-centered updates and requests for favors. All the physical remnants of a past I was finally ready to release. I built a small, contained fire pit. One by one, I fed the letters into the flames, watching them curl and blacken, turning into wisps of ash. The smoke carried them away, up into the clear blue sky. When the last ember died, I took a small bag of jasmine seeds from my pocket. I knelt, carefully mixing the ashes into the rich, dark soil. Then, I planted the jasmine seeds over them, a symbol of new beginnings, of beauty rising from destruction. I stood there, watching the gentle current of the stream, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face. The air smelled of earth and the faint, sweet scent of the wisteria. I wanted revenge. I thought it'd feel like fire, but it felt like air instead. Like freedom. Back in the main building, Autumn's retreat room sat empty. The bed was stripped, the small desk bare. On the floor, near the wastebasket, lay a single crumpled page, torn from a journal. I picked it up, my gaze falling on the hastily scrawled words. I still don't think I deserved this.
My 30th birthday dinner was held at a restaurant with white tablecloths and a menu so fancy it felt like a test. I'm Esther, and honestly, I was just trying to get through the night without someone asking if I'd tried that new keto diet. My family, bless their hearts, always had an opinion about my weight, or my lack of ambition, or my quietness. Basically, anything that wasn't Jayla. Jayla, my cousin, is 5 years younger than me, 25 and radiating that effortless glow that only comes from being told you're perfect your entire life. She was already buzzing, perched at the head of the table next to Aunt Naomi, her mom. My own father, Don, sat across from me, scrolling on his phone, occasionally grunting in response to something my older brother Cameron said. My grandmother, Paige, the family matriarch at 62, watched me with that familiar, slightly disappointed gaze. The cake had been cut, the polite applause faded, and then came the gifts. Jayla, of course, went first. Aunt Naomi, my mother's sister, beamed, practically preening, as Jayla tore into a glittery gold envelope. "Oh, my God!" Jayla shrieked, pulling out a crisp white check. $10,000 and a trip to Paris? Aunt Naomi, Uncle Don, this is incredible. My father actually looked up from his phone, a rare, almost proud smile on his face. "You deserve it, sweetie," he mumbled, glancing at Jayla, "for all your hard work." Jayla, who worked part-time at a boutique and spent most of her days on Instagram, preened. Then it was my turn. Aunt Naomi, 54 and impeccably dressed, slid a small, plain white envelope across the table to me. It looked like a bill. "Happy birthday, Esther," she chirped, her smile a little too wide, a little too tight. "We thought this might inspire you." I opened it. Inside was a glossy, full-color brochure for a local weight loss clinic. It featured a smiling, impossibly thin woman jogging on the cover. My stomach clenched. A ripple of polite, nervous laughter went around the table. Jayla giggled, covering her mouth with her hand. Cameron, my 33-year-old brother, cleared his throat and looked at his plate. My father just nodded, a faint, approving smirk playing on his lips. He was 57, and still, after all these years, he let his sister Naomi do his dirty work. "Oh," I said, my voice flat, but my smile, I hoped, was convincing. "How thoughtful." Naomi leaned in, her voice dropping to a stage whisper that everyone could hear. "You know, honey, you're 30 now. Time to really focus on your health. We just want you to be happy." Happy, right. Like a brochure for a diet plan was the key to my happiness. I looked down at the glossy paper, the smiling, thin woman, then back at Jayla, who was already showing off her Paris plane tickets to Caitlin, my 28-year-old cousin, who was just as opportunistic as the rest of them. They had no idea, none of them. For the past 5 years, I hadn't been living in some sad, lonely apartment, wallowing in their judgment. I'd been living in the guest house on Rosalind Sherman's estate. Rosalind, a 72-year-old widow with no immediate family, had taken me in when I was 25. It started after I found her collapsed in her driveway, a medical emergency that could have been fatal if I hadn't been walking by. I called 911, stayed with her, and even visited her in the hospital. She was grateful, and when she found out I was looking for a new place to live, she offered me the guest house, rent-free. It was a quiet life. I helped Rosalind with her correspondence, organized her medical appointments, and mostly, we just talked. She was sharp, witty, and saw things in me that my family never bothered to look for. She'd listen to me, really listen, and then she'd offer advice that wasn't about my waistline, but about my worth. She taught me to play chess, introduced me to classic literature, and showed me how to tend her rose garden. She told me I had a good heart, a strong mind, and a quiet strength they all underestimated. She was the family I always wished I had. I looked up from the brochure, my gaze settling on Jayla's glittering gift bag, the one that held her ticket to Paris. A calm, almost serene feeling settled over me. "You know," I said, my voice cutting through the chatter, just loud enough to get everyone's attention. They all turned, surprised I was speaking above a murmur. "I actually have something big coming soon, too, really big." My something big comment hung in the air, a tiny, almost imperceptible tremor in the carefully constructed facade of my family's polite indifference. Jayla, still basking in her Parisian glow, barely registered it. Aunt Naomi just gave me a patronizing nod as if I'd just announced I was going to try a new brand of yogurt. They didn't know the first thing about big when it came to my life. Their world was small, confined to their judgments and their expectations. My real world, the one that truly mattered, was tucked away behind a tall hedge, a 5-minute walk from the main house on Rosalind Sherman's sprawling estate. That guest house wasn't just a place to live, it was where I'd learned to breathe. It had been 5 years ago when I was 25. I was walking home from a job interview that I knew, even then, I wouldn't get. My family had just finished telling me for the 100th time that I needed to be more proactive, more outgoing, more like Jayla. I was feeling particularly low, kicking at pebbles on the sidewalk, when I saw her. An elderly woman crumpled on her long, winding driveway, a grocery bag spilled beside her. Her name was Rosalind. She'd had a stroke. I didn't hesitate. I called 911, stayed with her, talked to the paramedics, and even rode in the ambulance to the hospital. I didn't know her from Adam, but something in her eyes, even as they glazed over with pain, drew me in. I stayed at the hospital until her condition stabilized, and I visited her every day for a week. When she was discharged, she insisted I come to her home. She was a widow, she explained, her husband having passed years ago, and she had no children, no close family. She was alone. She looked at me, a young woman with no real direction, and saw something my own family never did. "You have a good heart, Esther," she'd said, her voice raspy but clear. "A rare thing these days." She learned I was looking for a new place, struggling to make ends meet with my part-time library job. Her guest house, she explained, was empty. "It's too much for me to maintain, and it feels a waste," she'd offered. "Live there, rent-free, just keep me company sometimes. Help me with my letters, maybe a drive to an appointment now and then." It was a lifeline. I moved in a week later. The guest house was small but perfectly formed, with its own kitchen, living room, and a bedroom overlooking a rose garden. It was quiet, peaceful, and mine. Over the next 5 years, Rosalind became the mother I never truly had. She didn't judge my weight or my quiet nature. Instead, she encouraged it. She taught me that observation was a strength, not a weakness. She helped me see my value outside of the narrow critical lens of my family. We'd spend hours in her sunroom, me reading aloud from her vast library or playing chess or just talking. She'd share stories of her life, her travels, her late husband, and I'd tell her about my day, about the subtle barbs from my family, about my dreams that felt too small to voice to anyone else. "They don't see you, Esther," she'd often say, her eyes twinkling. "And that's their loss, not yours. You are a diamond in the rough, and they're too busy looking at cubic zirconia." She used to tell me with a knowing smile that I was her only real family, the only one who truly cared. As the years passed, Rosalind grew frailer. Her health declined slowly, but her mind remained sharp, her spirit vibrant. We talked more about the future, about her legacy. She'd often say, "I've made my arrangements, Esther. You'll be taken care of." "You've earned it." I'd always brushed it off, thinking she meant some small token of appreciation, maybe a piece of jewelry or a painting. I never imagined the true scope of her gratitude. A few days after my 30th birthday dinner, the call came. It was Rosalind's nurse, her voice soft and apologetic. Rosalind had passed peacefully in her sleep that morning. My heart ached, a deep, hollow pain. I had known it was coming, but it didn't make it any easier. I walked over to the main house, sat by her bedside, and held her hand, remembering all her wisdom, her kindness. She had given me a home, yes, but more importantly, she had given me myself. I spent the next few days in a quiet haze, arranging flowers, notifying a few of Rosalind's distant acquaintances. My family, of course, didn't know Rosalind. They didn't know about the guest house, about my life there. They didn't know about the woman who had truly seen me. Then, a week after Rosalind's passing, my phone rang. It was a formal, clipped voice. "This is Mr. Davies, attorney for the estate of Rosalind Sherman. Her will specifically requested only one family member be present for the reading, you, Ms. Nichols." Mr. Davis's office was in a sleek, modern building downtown, a stark contrast to Rosalind's sprawling old money estate. He was a man in his late 50s, impeccably dressed, with kind but serious eyes. He offered me coffee, which I politely declined, my stomach a knot of nerves and a strange sense of anticipation. "Miss Nichols," he began, settling into his leather chair, a thick file open before him. "As you know, Rosalind Sherman passed away last week. I am the executor of her estate, and I've been instructed to read her will to you as per her specific request." He cleared his throat and started. The legal jargon was a blur at first, but certain phrases cut through the noise like sharp blades. "All real property, including the primary residence at 1420 Oakwood Lane and the detached guest house, my guest house. All financial assets, including stocks, bonds, and investment portfolios. All personal property, including art collections, jewelry, and vehicles." Then came the number. "The total estimated value of the estate as of the last appraisal is approximately $12 million. I felt the air leave my lungs. $12 million. It was a number so vast, so astronomical, it didn't feel real. My mind flashed back to the weight loss brochure, to Jayla's $10,000 check, a paltry sum in comparison. "And the sole inheritor," Mr. Davies continued, his voice steady, "is Esther Nichols." I just stared at him. Sole inheritor. Everything. The house, the guest house, the art, the money, all of it, to me. It was so much more than a piece of jewelry or a painting. It was everything. "Are you quite all right, Miss Nichols?" he asked, a hint of concern in his voice. I nodded, finally finding my voice. "Yes, just surprised, deeply surprised." He gave a small, knowing smile. "Rosalind was a remarkable woman. She spoke of you often, Miss Nichols, with immense affection and gratitude. She considered you family in a way her blood relatives regrettably never quite managed." He paused, then leaned forward, his expression becoming more serious. "Rosalind was also a very shrewd woman. She anticipated certain reactions. She was quite clear that while she had distant relatives, none of them were to receive any portion of her estate. She explicitly stated that her decision was based on a lifetime of observation and a desire to reward genuine kindness and loyalty over superficial connections." He then gestured to a stack of sealed envelopes beside the file. "She also left specific instructions. There are individual letters for certain individuals. These are to be read publicly at the formal will reading, which she insisted on having. And she insisted that you be present for that, of course." "Letters?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Yes. She was very particular about their contents and how they were to be delivered. She wanted her reasons to be clear." He looked at me, a flicker of something like admiration in his eyes. She told me you would understand. I understood. Rosalind, even in death, was looking out for me. She was giving me the ultimate mic drop. I left, Mr. Davies's office in a daze, the city lights blurring around me. I walked all the way back to the estate, the guest house suddenly feeling both familiar and entirely new. I was still Esther, 30 years old, quiet, and, according to my family, sturdy. But now I was also the sole inheritor of $12 million. The irony was almost suffocating. Back in the guest house, I pulled out my phone. Jayla had just posted another selfie from Paris, Eiffel Tower in the background, a caption about living her best life. My father had liked it. My Aunt Naomi had commented, "So proud of my beautiful girl." They were still living in their little bubble, completely oblivious to the seismic shift that had just occurred in my life and soon in theirs. They hadn't called to check on me after Rosalind's passing, not a single one of them, not even a text. They didn't know Rosalind, so her death meant nothing to them. I was just Esther, the quiet cousin who never quite measured up. I sat at my small kitchen table, the silence of the guest house amplifying the hum of the refrigerator. The weight loss brochure was still on the counter, a cruel memento from my birthday. I picked it up, ran my thumb over the thin woman's smiling face. A slow, deliberate smile spread across my own face. Rosalind had given me a gift far greater than money. She had given me power and a voice. I opened my laptop. It was time to start drafting invitations for a family dinner. The invitations were simple, elegant, and understated. No glitter, no fancy script, just a plain card requesting their presence for a family dinner at my place. My place, of course, meant the guest house on Rosalind's estate. I knew they'd assume it was just my small, rented cottage, not realizing it was part of something much, much bigger. I sent them out a week after my meeting with Mr. Davies, giving them enough time to return from their various vacations and busy lives. Jayla had been back from Paris for a few days, her social media still flooded with curated memories of her adventure. They arrived one by one a week later, Aunt Naomi, 54, looking vaguely confused about the address. My father, Don, 57, with a perfunctory nod. Cameron, 33, my brother, seemed the most genuinely surprised I'd invited them. Even grandmother Page, 62, made an appearance, her critical gaze sweeping over my modest living room. Jayla, 25, trailed in last, still radiating that smug self-satisfaction, probably wondering why she was wasting a Friday night at my tiny house. Caitlin, 28, my other cousin, was there too, her eyes already scanning for anything of value. The dinner itself was surprisingly normal. I'd cooked a simple but delicious meal, a roasted chicken, some vegetables, a fresh salad, nothing fancy, just good food. They ate, they made small talk, mostly about themselves. Jayla recounted her Parisian escapades in excruciating detail, complete with exaggerated accents. Naomi chimed in with how much she'd sacrificed for Jayla's trip. My father nodded along, occasionally grunting his approval. I listened, observed, and waited for my moment. After dinner, as we were having coffee and a store-bought cake, I wasn't going to bake for them. I decided to drop the first seed. It's been a strange few weeks, I began, stirring my coffee slowly. Rosalind passed away, you know. Aunt Naomi frowned. Rosalind? Who's Rosalind, dear? My landlady, I said, keeping my voice neutral. The woman who owned this guest house. She was very kind to me, a truly remarkable woman. Oh, right, Naomi said, dismissing it with a wave of her hand. Well, that's a shame. So are you looking for a new place now? Not exactly, I replied, a small smile playing on my lips. She was quite wealthy, actually, lived in the big house up the drive. She had no immediate family, so she left everything well, to whomever she chose. Cameron, who had been quiet, suddenly perked up. Wait, didn't she leave something behind? That house was huge. I saw it from the road once. Like old money, huge. He was 33 and his ears always pricked up at the mention of money. She did, I confirmed, taking a sip of coffee. A significant estate, millions, I hear. The atmosphere in the room shifted, a subtle tension, a prickle of curiosity. Naomi's eyes narrowed, her usual dismissive air replaced by a calculating glint. My father actually put his phone down. Jayla, ever the expert at turning any conversation back to herself, scoffed lightly. Millions? Wow! Well, good for her. I bet it's going to some obscure charity or something. Or maybe a distant relative no one's ever heard of. It's not like she'd know what to do with that kind of money, right, Esther? She gave me a condescending smile, as if the very idea of me handling wealth was laughable. You should probably just sell the house if it's too much trouble. It's not like you'd know what to do with that kind of money. I met her gaze, my smile widening just a fraction. Oh, I think I know exactly what to do with it, Jayla. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. Soon everyone will know exactly what I've done. Aunt Naomi cleared her throat. Well, that's interesting, Esther. Very interesting. Her eyes darted around the guest house as if suddenly reevaluating its potential worth. Just as the conversation was about to veer into more direct questions, my phone buzzed. It was an email from Mr. Davies, the formal invitations for the will reading. The date, time, and location. I opened it, then casually held up my phone. Speaking of Rosalind, looks like the lawyer is sending out formal invitations for the will reading. Everyone's invited. I didn't mention that the everyone was actually just them, my family, and that Rosalind had specifically requested it. Their eyes, previously filled with polite disinterest, suddenly brightened. Their fake smiles sharpened. The scent of greed, faint but unmistakable, began to fill the room. The email from Mr. Davies, the one inviting them to Rosalind's will reading, hit them like a bolt of lightning. Suddenly, I wasn't just Esther, the quiet, sturdy cousin. I was Esther, the potential conduit to Rosalind's millions. The shift was immediate and frankly pathetic. Aunt Naomi, 54, who had barely acknowledged my existence for years, suddenly started calling. Esther, darling, I was just thinking of you. I made too much casserole. Thought you might like some? The casserole arrived, still warm, and a dish she expected returned. It tasted suspiciously like the one she'd made for Jayla's graduation party. She started asking about Rosalind, fishing for details, trying to sound genuinely interested. Such a kind woman, your landlady. Did she ever mention family? Any long-lost cousins, perhaps? My father, Don, 57, who usually communicated in grunts and sighs, actually called me. Esther, honey, how are you managing? Rosalind's passing must be tough. Listen, if you need any help with anything, finances, I'm here. I've got a good head for numbers. This from the man who still asked me to set up his new phone every year. He even offered to take me to lunch, something he hadn't done since I was 10. Cameron, my 33-year-old brother, usually too busy with his own life to notice mine, became surprisingly attentive. He suggested we catch up over drinks. You know, Esther, you've always been the smart one in the family, really observant. I always said that. Remember that time you figured out Uncle Bob's secret Santa gift just by looking at the wrapping paper? He was laying it on thick, trying to remind me of some non-existent bond. But Jayla, 25, was the most transparent. She started asking for career advice. Jayla, who thought a career was a fancy Instagram feed. Esther, you're so grounded, so practical. How do you achieve that? I mean, with all your experience. She tried to make it sound like she genuinely valued my opinion, but her eyes would always dart towards the main house, her questions laced with thinly veiled curiosity about Rosalind's life, her habits, her wealth. She even offered to help me organize the guest house, which I knew was just an excuse to snoop. It was a parade of desperate charm, each attempt more transparent than the last. I played along, of course. I accepted the casseroles, listened to my father's financial advice, tolerated Cameron's sudden brotherly affection, and even gave Jayla vague, unhelpful career tips. I smiled, I nodded, I kept my voice calm and pleasant, but in my mind, I saw the flashbacks. I saw Aunt Naomi years ago at my high school graduation, telling my mother loudly, Esther's a lovely girl, but she's just so sturdy. Not like Jayla, so delicate. I was 18 then, and the word sturdy had felt like a brick to the chest. I saw Jayla at a family Christmas when I was 22 and trying to talk about a book I loved, interrupted me with, Oh, Esther, are you still reading those dusty old things? You should try going out more. Get a life. I saw my father when I was 26 brushing off my excitement about a promotion at the library. That's nice, honey, but when are you going to get a real job? Something with more potential? He'd always compared me to Cameron, who had a flashy sales job, or to Jayla, who was just inherently special. The only person who saw through it all was Trinity. Trinity Willis, my childhood friend, 35, and the only person in my life who consistently validated me. I called her after one particularly excruciating lunch with Aunt Naomi. They're circling, aren't they? Trinity said, her voice dry, like vultures around a particularly large, shiny carcass. You have no idea, I sighed, recounting the latest charade. Esther, she said, her voice firm, you don't owe them a dime, not a single penny. Remember that. They showed you who they were for 30 years. Don't let them rewrite history now. I know, I said, looking out at Rosalind's rose garden, the sun setting, casting long shadows. I won't. I remained calm, playing the part of the slightly overwhelmed, potentially wealthy but still unassuming Esther. The will reading was set for the following week. The tension in the air, the palpable greed, was almost intoxicating. Then, at a family lunch a few days before the reading, Aunt Naomi leaned over to me, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. You know your cousin Jayla is getting married soon. She and her fiancé are looking at venues, and it's all so expensive. You should consider chipping in from what Rosalind left. It'd just be the fair thing, wouldn't it? Family helping family. I just smiled. Fairness is a funny thing, Aunt Naomi. The day of the will reading dawned bright and clear, a cruel contrast to the storm brewing inside the conference room at Mr. Davies's office. I arrived a few minutes early, dressed simply in a dark skirt and a cream blouse. I felt calm, almost serene, a quiet observer ready for the show to begin. One by one they trickled in, a procession of fake smiles and carefully chosen outfits. Aunt Naomi, 54, was in a tailored suit, her hair perfectly coiffed, a look of expectant piety on her face. My father, Don, 57, wore a tie for the first time in years, looking uncomfortable but eager. Cameron, 33, My brother was trying to project an air of casual confidence, but his eyes darted around the room, assessing. Jayla, 25, was in a designer dress, her phone already out, probably planning a selfie for later. Even Grandmother Page, 62, was there, perched regally, her gaze sharp and calculating. Caitlin, 28, was already whispering to Jayla, their heads together. They greeted me with forced warmth, a chorus of, "Esther, dear, how are you holding up?" And "So glad we could all be here for Rosalind." They acted as if they'd known Rosalind their entire lives, as if they hadn't completely ignored her existence until the prospect of her wealth arose. Mr. Davies, the lawyer, entered carrying a thick file. He nodded to me, a subtle acknowledgment, then took his place at the head of the long conference table. The room fell silent, a palpable tension settling in. Everyone leaned forward, eyes fixed on the file. "Good morning," Mr. Davies began, his voice clear and professional. "Thank you for coming. As you know, we are here today for the reading of the last will and testament of Rosalind Sherman." He went through the initial formalities, the legal preamble, which everyone tolerated impatiently. Then he got to the heart of it. "Rosalind Sherman, being of sound mind and body, hereby revokes all previous wills and codicils, and declares this to be her last will and testament." He began to read the will in full, detailing Rosalind's assets, her charitable donations, and then, the crucial part, the beneficiaries. "To my dear friend and companion, Esther Nichols, who has shown me unwavering kindness, loyalty, and genuine affection over the past 5 years, and who has become the daughter and spirit loyalty and love I never had, I bequeath my entire estate, including all real property, financial assets, and personal possessions, with an estimated value of $12 million. The words hung in the air, echoing in the stunned silence. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Naomi's jaw went slack. My father's eyes bulged. Jayla's perfectly made-up face contorted in disbelief. Cameron actually choked on air. Grandmother Page, for the first time, looked genuinely shocked. Their heads snapped towards me. I just sat there, impassive, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on my lips. Mr. Davies continued, his voice unwavering. "Rosalind Sherman anticipated that this decision might come as a surprise to some present. Therefore, she has left specific individual letters for certain family members, which she requested be read aloud immediately following the reading of the will." Every member of my family leaned forward, their expressions a mix of confusion and a desperate hope that these letters might somehow explain a hidden clause, a secret trust fund for them. They thought they were about to be let in on some grand benevolent plan. They had no idea. Mr. Davies picked up the first of a stack of sealed envelopes. He looked at the name on the front. The first letter is addressed to Naomi Sherman. Aunt Naomi, still reeling from the initial shock, straightened up, a flicker of hope in her eyes. She probably thought it was an apology or a consolation prize. Mr. Davies opened the envelope, unfolded the letter, and began to read. His voice, usually so formal, took on a slight, almost imperceptible edge as he read Rosalind's precise, damning words. "To the woman who weighed my worth on a scale, I return your gift with truth." The air in the room crackled with a silence so profound you could almost hear their minds scrambling to process Rosalind's opening line to Aunt Naomi. Naomi's face, moments ago flushed with a mixture of shock and dawning hope, now paled. Her eyes darted to me, then back to Mr. Davies, who continued to read, his voice steady and unwavering. "Naomi Sherman," he read, "you once told Esther that she was sturdy, not delicate like her cousin. You gifted her a weight loss brochure on her 30th birthday, implying her worth was tied to her size. I witnessed the quiet pain that caused, and I saw how Esther carried it with grace. My estate is not measured in pounds or inches, but in loyalty and love. You, Naomi, have shown neither to Esther nor to me, a woman you never bothered to know, despite your shared family name. This estate measures true value, not superficial appearance. Naomi gasped, a small, choked sound. Her perfectly coiffed hair seemed to droop. She looked as though she'd been slapped. Mr. Davies then picked up the next envelope. The next letter is for Don Nichols. My father, Don 57, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He'd been so quick to side with Naomi and Jayla, so dismissive of me. Don Nichols, Mr. Davies read, "You are Esther's father, yet you consistently chose to be absent emotionally, preferring to praise superficial achievements over genuine character. You allowed your sister to belittle your daughter, and you never once stood up for her. You valued status and appearance over the quiet strength and intelligence that defined Esther. My legacy is built on substance, not on the fleeting approval of others. You will find no portion of it here." My father's face was a mask of disbelief, then anger. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The lawyer moved on, his movements precise. "This letter is for Cameron Nichols." Cameron, 33, who had suddenly become my supportive brother, visibly flinched. "Cameron Nichols," the lawyer read, "you have always been quick to turn greedy when money is involved, yet slow to offer genuine support or kindness to your sister. You saw Esther's quiet nature as a weakness rather than a thoughtful observation. You sought to exploit her potential good fortune rather than celebrate her true worth. My estate is not a free-for-all for opportunists. It is a testament to integrity." Cameron slumped back in his chair, his face flushed. Next was Jayla. Her carefully constructed facade of effortless perfection began to crack. "Jayla Nichols, Mr." Davies read, his voice cutting through the thick silence. "You have been accustomed to praise and reward for superficial charm and conventional attractiveness. You mocked Esther's choices and dismissed her potential, believing her quiet demeanor meant she had nothing to offer. Beauty fades, entitlement bursts. Esther's kindness is a style you cannot fake, and her resilience is a strength you will never possess. My wealth is not a prize for those who believe they are inherently superior." Jayla, 25, looked like she'd been punched. Her eyes, usually so bright and confident, filled with tears of pure, unadulterated rage and humiliation. She opened her mouth to protest, but Mr. Davies held up a hand, silencing her. "And finally," he said, picking up 2 more envelopes, "a letter for Caitlin Sullivan and one for Paige Hernandez." Caitlin, 28, my opportunistic cousin, received a short, sharp rebuke for her detached and self-serving nature, her constant search for advantage. Grandmother Paige, 62, the matriarch, received a letter that spoke of her critical gaze, her judgment of Esther's life choices, and her failure to see beyond societal expectations. Every letter ended the same, Rosalind's damning verdict echoing through the room. "Inheritance only passes through hearts that never judged mine." The room was dead silent. The truth, raw and unvarnished, had settled in. Their faces were a kaleidoscope of shock, humiliation, and simmering fury. They had come expecting a share, a slice of the pie, and instead they had received a public dissection of their character flaws, delivered by a woman they had never even bothered to know. Rosalind, in her final act, had not only left me everything, but she had also given me the ultimate vindication. She had ensured that my family, who had belittled me for 3 decades, would know exactly why they received nothing. There was no hidden clause, no conditions for me, no trust fund for them. The only heir to the $12 million was me. It was all mine. And Rosalind had set this up with my full consent after many long, thoughtful conversations about their treatment of me. She had insisted on these letters, on this public reading, as a final act of justice. I watched them, their faces contorted, their carefully constructed personas crumbling. It was a masterpiece of karmic justice. Mr. Davies closed the file. That concludes the reading of the will and the distribution of the letters. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single plain white envelope. I handed it to Mr. Davies. "One more letter," I said, my voice clear and steady. "Mine." He looked at me, a flicker of understanding in his eyes, and nodded. He knew it was my final goodbye to Rosalind, a private acknowledgement of the woman who had truly seen me. The will reading ended with a stunned silence, broken only by the rustle of papers as Mr. Davies gathered his things. My family sat frozen, their faces etched with a mixture of humiliation and impotent fury. No one spoke. No one dared to look at me directly. The air was thick with the weight of Rosalind's words, a truth bomb that had detonated precisely as intended. I stood up, gave Mr. Davies a small, grateful nod, and walked out, leaving them to simmer in their own shame. Life after that day settled into a rhythm I hadn't known was possible. I moved out of the guest house and into the main house, Rosalind's sprawling estate now truly mine. The $12 million, once an abstract number, became a tangible reality managed by Mr. Davies and a team of financial advisors. I spent my days learning about investments, meeting with architects, and, most importantly, planning the Rosalind Sherman Foundation. It was to be a foundation dedicated to supporting women in the arts and sciences, particularly those from underestimated backgrounds. Rosalind had always believed in fostering talent that might otherwise be overlooked, and I intended to honor that. Months passed. Jayla, 25, eventually had her wedding. It wasn't the lavish affair she'd once envisioned, but a modest backyard ceremony. I received an invitation, a generic one, clearly sent out of obligation. I attended, dressed simply, blending into the background. Jayla saw me, of course. Our eyes met across the lawn. Her smile faltered, her face tightening. We didn't speak. My presence, a silent testament to Rosalind's will, was enough. It was a stark reminder of what she had lost and what I had gained. My father, Don, 57, tried to call a few times, always with some vague excuse about family matters. I politely declined his invitations. Aunt Naomi, 54, never called again. Cameron, 33, sent a few texts, trying to reestablish a connection, but I kept my distance. Caitlin, 28, disappeared from my radar entirely. The family dynamic, once a suffocating web of judgment and expectation, had finally irrevocably broken. One afternoon, a few months after Jayla's wedding, I was walking through Rosalind's rose garden, a place that now felt entirely my own. Grandmother Page, 62, was sitting on a bench looking out at the flowers. She looked smaller, somehow less formidable. "Esther," she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "You knew, didn't you, all along?" I stopped beside her. "Knew what, grandmother?" She sighed, a weary sound. "About Rosalind, about the will, about everything. I always thought you were just quiet, reserved, never realized you were watching everything." I looked at the vibrant roses, their petals unfurling in the sun. "You never look closely enough, grandmother." She didn't argue. She just nodded, A slow, contemplative nod. I suppose not. The air between us wasn't hostile, just final. The old power dynamic was gone, replaced by a quiet, unstated understanding. She saw me now, truly saw me, for the first time in my 30 years. Later that evening, in Rosalind's study, surrounded by her books and the scent of old paper, I took out the letter I had given to Mr. Davies, the one I had written for Rosalind. I read it aloud, just to the quiet room, to the memory of the woman who had changed my life. Dearest Rosalind, I began, my voice soft, thank you, not just for the home or the security or even the incredible gift you've left me. Thank you for seeing me, for hearing me, for showing me that chosen love, true connection, can be so much stronger than blood. You taught me my worth, and you gave me the courage to stand in it. Because of you, I finally understand that I didn't lose weight. I shed judgment, and it turns out revenge looks just fine on me.